Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The children in the village used to tease little Lisa about being a frog. The girl had black, shiny eyes, red hair braided into two tight pigtails that made her head seem perfectly round. She had a big red mouth and freckles all over her face. And Lisa wore a green jumpsuit, which she loved. That was enough to get her a hurtful nickname. At first, the girl tried to fight with her abusers, but since they were mostly boys, the fights were lost in advance. Lisa Wendy's mom was upset every time she saw her daughter coming back after children's games. Not in the best condition, hair was on the green overalls, holes on the palms of her hands, abrasions. Wendy spoke to her daughter, asking her not to mess with the boys. "They're stronger than you," she screamed in frustration. "Why are you fighting with them?" "I don't want to be called a frog," replied the daughter. After a while, the mother realized she needed to change tactics after another fight with her daughter, when she came back with a black eye and her pant leg almost torn off. Wendy said, "And why, exactly, do you resent them?" Close looked at her mom in surprise. "I mean, she knows perfectly well what the reason for the fight is." "Why?" she asks. "Have you forgotten? The boys call me a frog, Mom." Wendy raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Are frogs bad?" Did Lisa open her mouth? "Probably not." Carefully, she said, "But they're not pretty, are they?" Lisa couldn't tell if her mother was being serious or joking. "Well, they're green and wet and quacky." Wendy pretended to think about it. "I think green is a very pretty color. It's the color of grass leaves. And the fact that the frog is wet makes sense. It lives near water and swims a lot. So there's a third frog. That's what my daughter said. A duck poops, a cow moo, a frog quacks. What's wrong?" Close thought about it. For some reason, she couldn't think of what was offensive about it. "It turns out, finally," said the girl, "that there is nothing offensive in the word frog." "It turns out so. But they will still be called names. Except it doesn't start when they call you a frog, but when you take it as an insult." Lisa sighed and climbed into her mother's lap. Wendy smiled and hugged her daughter. "Mommy," said the little girl, "how smart are you? I think you know everything about everything in the world." Wendy sighed. If only, daughter, if only. Wendy was born far away from Jenna, from her hometown of Boston. It was almost 2 days by train to this village, and not to the village itself, but only to the station. From the station, it was another 5 kilometers on a broken dirt road. When Wendy was a child, she had never imagined that she would ever move so far from home. Her parents were well-to-do and generally cultured people. Daddy lectured to future economists. Mom worked as a saleswoman in a boutique, an expensive clothing store. Wendy was their only daughter, a welcome late-born child. Even before she was born, Mom and Dad planned the girl's future. What kind of kindergarten would she go to? What kind of school would she attend? That she would additionally practice swimming and chess. That she would enter the University of Arts. The girl grew up as a princess, neat, obedient, affectionate. Her parents could not be pleased with her and did not notice that under the calmness and gentleness hides a steely character. Perhaps Wendy herself did not know that she had an indomitable will. It appeared by chance when Wendy was a sophomore in high school. She was offered to go on tour with the student theater in the summer. Wendy accepted. It was a great opportunity to get some practice, earn a little money, and see a lot of beautiful places. Mostly they traveled to small villages and hamlets, where they had almost no entertainment. Students performed more often in the open air. And if they were lucky, then in schools, kindergartens, and libraries. The farthest point in their tour was Light Long Their Critters, and saw Sebastian, local teacher. It was love at first sight, despite the fact that they spent together only one evening after the performance. When the teacher invited the young actress to walk along the riverbank, the young people decided that they no longer wanted to part. But parting had to be done. Wendy and the theater went home. Sebastian stayed in the village for another month. After that, they corresponded. Then Sebastian went to Boston to ask for his sweetheart's hand in marriage. His parents were against it. "What wedding?" yelled Wendy at her mom. "You're only 19, and where will you live?" added her father. I have my own house, replied Sebastian, where continued shouting at Mom in the village. Mom, Dad entered the conversation already. Wendy, I agree to move. You've never lived in the village. So, have you adapted? What about school? I'll finish it by correspondence. They couldn't come to an agreement. The parents were adamant. Let's end this argument, Dad said. Either you stay here with us and forget about your village nonsense and love, or you are no longer our daughter. Wendy pressed her lips together and nodded. I hear you. She took Sebastian by the arm, leading him to her room. There she quickly packed her suitcase and held it out to her teacher. Are you sure? He asked softly. I'm sure, Wendy replied. They were married as soon as they arrived in Sebastian's homeland. Before that, Wendy had met her future mother-in-law, Anna. They liked each other immediately. Anna is very soft and affectionate. The woman also worked as a teacher, just like her son. Despite the fact that Wendy was a city dweller, she got used to the village quickly. She liked the quiet, unhurried life that her husband and Anna had here. Wendy learned to stoke the stove, plant a vegetable garden, pick mushrooms and berries. Of course, all the hard work her husband took on the job. Wendy took a job as a librarian. She enjoyed spending time surrounded by books. She also started a theater group for children. A year later, Lisa was born to Wendy and Sebastian. The young parents couldn't get enough of their daughter. Now their family was a real, full cup. It seemed that nothing could mar their happiness. But it didn't last long. When Lisa was 3 years old, Sebastian died. He went fishing in early spring, fell through the ice and drowned. If it hadn't been for Anna, Wendy wouldn't have survived the loss. She grieved for her husband so much that she even seemed to forget about her little daughter. Lisa barely remembers this time. She has one vague memory of her father, of him laughing, taking her in his arms and spinning her around with him. Her father has freckles on his cheeks, blue eyes, and light red hair. Lisa had little memory of his death. At the time, she just didn't understand why she was always cheerful and smiling. Her mom now lay on the couch all day long and was silent and hardly spoke at all. During that period, Anna practically lived, took care of her granddaughter, made her daughter-in-law eat, drink, wash her face. After a month, she got tired of waiting for Wendy to come to her senses, sent Lisa out for a walk, the neighbor kids, and started the conversation enough, Wendy. Sebastian is dead, and there's nothing you can do about it. Think of your daughter. Is it her fault what happened? Imagine what it's like for her to live without her mother. I understand, Anna replied weakly, but I can't help it. What would Sebastian say? The mother-in-law continued. I think he would want you to go on with your life, to bring up your daughter. If you died and he lived, what would he do? Tears rolled down Wendy's face. He wouldn't be lying in bed, she said quietly. He would have lived, worked, taken care of his daughter. She sobbed. Anna hugged her tightly around the shoulders and cried too. The women sat like that for an hour. After that, Wendy began to return to life. Of course, without her beloved husband, life had lost all its colors. What did she have? Only her daughter kept her alive. Wendy went back to work, started to work hard on the household. It was hard without a man in the house, but she coped with Anna, helping each other. That's how they lived their little female family. Varvara liked living in the Light Wolf. Even after the death of her husband, she did not consider the option of returning to her parents in Boston. She still remembered their harsh words about ceasing to be their daughter if she left. Of course, while Lisa was growing up, Wendy often thought about the fact that a daughter had a right to know that she had grandparents besides Anna. She'd even tried writing a letter to her parents a few times, but each time she'd torn the sheets into small pieces and thrown them in the oven. All right, she reassured herself. Lisa will grow up, I will tell her everything, and then let her decide for herself whether she wants to communicate with them. But as much as she disliked Jenna herself, sometimes Wendy wondered where it would be better for her daughter to live. She brought it up in a conversation with Lisa. Do you like it here? Wendy asked. Her daughter raised her eyebrows in surprise. We're here in our house. The mother smiled uncertainly at both the house and the village. Carefully, she pronounced, I keep thinking about your future. You're about to finish school and you'll have to go to university. Have you thought about where you want to go? The daughter shrugged her shoulders. Not yet. I'll decide later. But I don't want to leave. I'd like to stay with you and Grandma. Wendy sat closer and hugged her daughter. Grandma and I would like you to be with us too. But it's not possible. There's nothing to do in our village. You have to think about the future. Lisa frowned. You've lived here all your life. My dad lived here and my grandmother. All right, they're local. But you could have come back at any time, but you stayed because of your dad's memory. And that's why Wendy didn't mind either. But there were other reasons. I like how nice and quiet it is here. This pace of life suits me, and I don't want to move any closer to my mother. She loved these moments when they sat on the porch and hugged and talked about something personal. Mom. Cautiously, she began a conversation she had been thinking about for a long time, but had never dared to have. You're not old, thank you, Mom said with a smile. Are you glad you think so? Lescott continued. You could get married again, get out of here, start a new life, maybe even have more children. Wendy looked at her with surprise. Lisa blushed, but she had put off this conversation for too long. Mom, I'm serious. I think you didn't do it because you raised me. Also in memory of Dad, and because you were afraid I wouldn't understand it. Lisa interrupted her mother with embarrassment. Thank you for your words. I'm glad you care about me. But believe me, I'm quite happy if I ever meet the man I'm going to love. That would be wonderful. But I think I'm still in love with your father. Lisa was graduating from high school this year, and senior year was exciting and hopeful for her and her classmates. Like all 17-year-olds, it seemed to them that childhood was about to end and real adulthood was about to begin. What exams have you chosen? Asked Lisa Cindy, her best friend. She wasn't going to continue her studies herself. She decided to stay in the village. Irina Mama was the owner of the best store in the village, and her daughter was going to start as a sales clerk and then, after learning everything from the inside, to work on an equal footing with her mother. In addition to Russian and math, I will pass literature, social studies, and history, Lisa replied. You've made up your mind. Where are you going to enter? The friend shrugged her shoulders. I'll think about it in the summer after the exams. Cindy stretched dreamily. My mother said that I can rest until September, and then every day in the store. The face of the friend is upset. Hold out, and then you will go away to study and general boredom will be. But we have the summer. Let's make it unforgettable. Lisa laughed. She was a pretty calm person. Her friend, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. Lisa Cindy noticed the doubt on her face. Don't be so absent-minded. Let yourself relax a little. Nothing's going to happen in one summer. Okay, Lisa sighed. They passed their exams quite well. The graduation party at their small school was simple, no frills, but very sincere and cozy. Now the real summer begins, said Cindy. We'll start going out tomorrow. I was a bit uncertain, said Lisa. You'll like it. Did the young people in their village have a lot of fun? Of course, Lisa used to take part in them, but not so often. The evening would start with Lisa visiting a friend. She would sit listening to music, putting on makeup and going through outfits. So Cindy said grudgingly, What kind of look is that? What's the matter? Do you look like a nerd? Lisa took offense. Okay, peacefully said her friend. But I'm sorry. You look like you're going to school, not a party. After these words, she walked resolutely over to her friend, unraveled her tightly braided pigtails. Red curls scattered over her shoulders. You have the most beautiful hair. Of all the girls I know, Cindy said. You bet I do. Lisa was embarrassed. I was always teased about it when I was a kid. I remember, said her friend. Fools of all kinds. She tinted Lisa's lips lightly with a light lipstick, making them look a little more expressive. Then she eyelined her eyes and put a little mascara on her lashes. Now that's a different look, Cindy said, satisfied with the result. Lisa looked at herself in the mirror and saw a slender, short girl with a mop of red hair and big black, slightly frightened eyes. Freckles scattered across her fair skin. You're very pretty, Cindy said to her. It's all thanks to you. No, it's not. I just emphasized it a little. With makeup, Lisa looked a little older than her years. All right, she said. You get ready too, or we'll miss the whole thing. Her friend rolled her eyes. Don't be ridiculous. The later it is, the more fun it is. She got dressed quickly, however, her thick black hair in a high ponytail, and she eyed her eyes, which made them look even bigger. Wore a black turtleneck and jeans. I took a warm sweater. Critically examined Lisa, who was wearing a long, thin green dress. Did you bring anything warm? It's going to be cold at night. Come on, Lisa shrugged. It's warm now, and then we'll be sitting by the fire anyway. I can bring you something. No, that's okay. As you know, they arrived at the village club. There weren't many people inside yet. There was music, but it was just a warm-up band. The girls waved to their classmates on the porch and went inside. There they said hello to the girls and sat down on a bench inside. There aren't many people inside, Lisa sighed. So early, said Cindy. Wait, in 2 hours it will be more interesting. Indeed, after a while the young people began to gather. The girls all had brightly colored hair, flowery dressed in the best they had found at home. The guys kept to themselves. Old men did not approach the girls. Were they all drinking beer, smoking on the porch, or discussing their man stuff? Wow, some strangers are here, said Cindy. I haven't seen them here before. Lisa looked in the direction her friend had nodded. There were 3 guys standing there. Yes, definitely not from their village. Her attention was drawn to the one who was in the company of the oldest. He must be 23, 24 years old. Tall, 2 heads taller than Lisa, black hair that curled a bit if you looked at it, and green eyes that he looked directly at her with. Usually guys would look away if they saw a girl catch them peeking. But not this one. He was staring intently straight at Lisa. Eventually, she couldn't stand it herself and looked away. Liked? Cindy asked snidely. Lisa shrugged her shoulders indifferently. Let's go dancing, she asked. Let's go. The music got louder. They were already fashionable songs, meant to be fun. The young people knew them by heart and ran to the dance floor with pleasure. In a minute, the girls had already forgotten about the unfamiliar guys and were dancing with pleasure, as they dance only at the age of 17 at a summer village disco. The fun lasted until 1 o'clock in the morning. Then the club director, Aka, the DJ, and the security guard, that she was closing the place down. All disappointed murmured, indignant, but not seriously, because they knew these are the rules. Nobody got upset. It is clear that now the fun will continue, just in another place. The guys who came on their cars and motorcycles drove the girls to each vehicle, got more people than the safety rules allowed. But the guys didn't care. The girls squealed, sat on each other's laps squeezed out, trying to give space to others who wanted it. They too climbed into the back seat in some unfamiliar car. Cindy sat little Lisa on her lap. She tilted her head so that she wouldn't bang her head on the ceiling and suddenly looked in the driver's mirror. Familiar and green eyes looked at her with a grin. Whose car is this? Lisa's mind flashed. She blushed and hastily looked away, pretending to be busy talking to her friend. The place was not far from the outskirts of the village, in the woods, about 15 minutes away. Firewood was already prepared there. Those guys who came first light a fire around the fire. There were logs cleaned from the bark. On them, the young people who have arrived sit down. A little farther away they have a coffin, a wooden table pinned up. It is used more as a warehouse. There is beer, cups in which they pour it, seed and breadcrumbs. The guys pour their own drinks, but it's customary to woo the girls. Lisa is embarrassed, but Cindy firmly takes her hand and they approach the table. Have a nice evening, girls. Sebastian, their classmate, tells them with a smile. He is already missing a front tooth. What's wrong, Sebastian? Cindy asked. His face became sad. The outsiders got into a fight. He nods somewhere to the side. Wow, why are they here then? Lisa asked cautiously. Sebastian waved his hand. We've already made up with them. Normal guys live in the neighboring village. Your mom would kill you for a tooth, Cindy said sympathetically. Yes, it's sad, my classmate admitted. But then he added philosophically, what can we do? Shouldn't we have fun now? The girls moved aside, chose a free place on one of the logs and sat down. Lisa carefully took a sip from a plastic cup and wrinkled her nose. It tasted bitter. You don't have to drink it if you don't want to. Quietly, her friend told her. Just keep it in your hand so you don't stand out. Otherwise, one of the guys might get to you. Lisa said, well. She decided to herself that she would try to drink at least this glass. Why here and now by this big fire, surrounded by laughing guys? Lisa really wanted to be like everyone else. There were a lot of people. Of course, everyone split into small groups that chatted amongst themselves. The main part was around the campfire. There's always some guy in every company who keeps the attention. Here it was a huge, 2-meter-tall, slightly overweight Mike. His loud bass could be heard throughout the forest. Mike always had an incredible amount of stories to tell. Maybe his stories weren't so incredible. He just knew how to tell them. Lisa laughed. She felt good, except for the cold. Cindy was right after all. She should have brought something warm with her. She shrugged shakily, and a moment later she felt something warm and heavy on her shoulders. She flinched and whirled her head around. Don't be frightened. Beautiful. A pleasant male voice came from above. The tall, black-haired stranger sat down on the log next to her. I'm not afraid, Lisa replied. Thanks for the jacket. You're welcome. What's your name? Lisa. I'm Ethan. He held out his hand, and Lisa shook it, surprised. The hand was big and hard with calluses. What small and delicate fingers you have, Ethan said. Lisa blushed and turned back to the fire. Why haven't I seen you here before? Asked the boy. You're a local. You just don't come here much. That's how. How old are you? You turned 18 at the end of May, and you're 24. You graduated from high school this year. Are you staying here, or are you going to enroll? He sighed. It's a pity. I wouldn't want such a beautiful girl to leave us. Lisa grinned. You saw me a couple hours ago. Ethan shrugged his broad shoulders, and it took a minute to realize that I liked you. Lisa lowered her head. You're very persistent. Maybe other girls like it, but it rather intimidates me. He moved closer to her ear. Goosebumps ran down Lisa's neck. I'm sorry, he said, and then pulled back a little. I didn't mean to scare you. I just don't like to waste time. Did I like you? I did. After a while, Ethan's buddies came up to him and told him it was time to go home. He nodded and told them to go to the car. I'll catch up. The guys shot their eyes in Lisa's direction, but said nothing and shaved to the car. When will I see you next time? He asked. I don't know. Tomorrow. I don't know. Tomorrow, Lisa. She shook her head stubbornly. Ethan stood up and walked toward the car. Wait. Lisa ran after him. He turned around and stopped. What's with the jacket? She took it off her shoulders and handed it to him. Leave it on, it'll freeze. By the time you get home. And you in the car will not freeze. You'll give it back tomorrow. When Lisa came home, her mother was awake, sitting in the kitchen reading by the light of the lamp. What are you doing up? Lisa asked her. Mom looked up and smiled. The book was interesting. How was your walk? It was good. Lisa usually told her mother everything, but this time she didn't want to tell her about meeting a boy from the neighboring village who was 6 years older than her. Mom would worry. Okay, I'm going to bed tiredly, she said. Good night, daughter. Good night, Mommy. Wendy gave her daughter a look. She seemed to have something going on. Judging by the smile and the dreamy look, something good. And since she didn't want to talk about it, it's probably because of the boy. So she knew her daughter would grow up someday. She just didn't expect it to happen so soon. Of course, the next day Lisa went for a walk. So, did you like Ethan after all? Cindy asked her. I just want to give him his jacket back, Lisa said. Why are you blushing? I'm not blushing. That's why you asked me to keep the jacket. Mom would have asked what the jacket was, and if I'd given you the jacket, you wouldn't have been so nervous. You're different. Lisa frowned and angrily staggered forward. Cindy bit her lip, followed her. She had never seen her friend so nervous before. This time, as soon as they arrived. Lisa did nothing but look around as if searching for someone with her gaze. He never arrives so early, Cindy said softly. I'm not expecting anyone. Lisa said in a shaky voice. I'm sorry if I offended you. Added her friend. I didn't mean to. It's all right, said Lisa. And I'm sorry too. I guess you were right. I liked Ethan, and I'm a little scared. The important thing, Cindy said urgently, was not to rush things. Let things take their course. Trust your heart. Lisa took a deep breath, smiled, and rested her head on her friend's shoulder. I love you so much. You are the most wonderful thing. Cindy sighed and took Lisa's hand. I love you too. Ethan only arrived with his buddies when the bonfire started. By then, Lisa was sitting on pins and needles. She'd almost given up hope of ever seeing him. She even missed the moment when his car pulled up. But hello, beautiful. She heard a familiar, clear voice behind her. Lisa smiled and looked back. Hi, she said and held out her jacket. Thank you. It was very helpful. I see you're warmer dressed today, he remarked. Lisa nodded. Yes, decided it wasn't fair to make you freeze every day. For you, beautiful. I'd do anything for you. Lisa laughed. Let's warm up a bit, he suggested, pointing to a vacant place by the fire. Come on. When they sat down, Ethan took her hand in his. He did it calmly and naturally, as if it were meant to be. Lisa didn't even have the urge to pull his hand away. Tell me about yourself, Ethan asked after a few minutes. Lisa raised her eyebrows in surprise. What you want to hear? Everything. He looked at her very seriously and shook her hand harder. I'm actually curious, and you're curious about everything. I'm just an ordinary girl, Lisa said, feeling herself blush. Ethan shook his head. Not true. Could a girl with those huge black eyes and hair the color of fire be ordinary? He suddenly leaned forward and gently kissed her lips quickly and lightly, then pulled away and smiled. You started to say something, Lisa, but stopped talking and looked away. Ethan asked, still smiling as well, very cheeky. He shrugged. I just don't like wasting time. I really like you. You like me too. I can see that. I'm sorry. I'm not like that. Quickly, Lisa stood up and walked away. Ethan jumped up and ran after her. I'm sorry, he shouted. He caught up and stood in front of her, blocking her way. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Lisa lowered her head. I really like you a lot, he continued. I won't lay a finger on you again unless you ask me to. Honestly? Lisa asked. He nodded. I'll ask your permission before I do anything, agreed. Yes, he looked away. They were far away from the campfire where all the guys were. Their laughter and voices echoed in the background. There was a full moon shining in the sky, and there was a good view all around. If you want, we can take a little walk, Ethan suggested. I think there must be a lake somewhere nearby. Lisa nodded. Lake was too strong a word. It's just a little pond. But all right, let's go for a walk. They walked along the narrow forest path, grasshoppers singing, the air smelling of flowers and a little damp. I don't mind if I hold your hand, Ethan asked. No. When they reached the lake, which turned out to be a small pond drawn by Tina. The boy laid out on the grass the jacket he had borrowed from Lisa yesterday, and they sat down. Tell me about yourself, Lisa asked. He shrugged and ran his hand over his head of disheveled, thick black hair. I live in the Blacksop. Do you know where that is? Lisa nodded. Yes, 30 kilometers from us. How far is it for you to drive? He shrugged his shoulders at the car. It's quick. My parents work on a farm. I used to help out there, but now I work for my dad's brother. He has a little car shop on the highway. You like cars? Yeah, I'm pretty good with cars. The guys that come with me are my uncle and my sons. They're like my cousins. What else do you like about dogs? Without a second thought, Ethan answered. We have 5 of them at home. They sat there most of the night. Lisa came to her senses when she noticed that the sky on the horizon of the couple was about to dawn. Terrified, she screamed. Ethan got to his feet. Don't worry, I'll get you home. She shook her head. Don't, in case Mom sees anything. I'll get to know her. There was something so mature and decisive in his voice that Lisa didn't argue. On the contrary, she felt very calm when they returned to the fire, where there was almost no one left. The Ethan brothers looked at them with a sly smile. Lisa blushed even though she had done nothing wrong. I'll take Lisa and be right back, Ethan told the brothers. He drove her all the way to the house. No one came out to greet them, and Lisa breathed a sigh of relief. We could go to the river with the boys this weekend, Ethan suggested. There's a lot of people there. You bring your friends too. Lisa said okay. He gave her a quick peck on the cheek before the meeting. Her mom didn't ask her anything. Or rather, she didn't ask her any specific questions, only inquired about her daughter's condition. "Are you okay?" "Yes," Mom answered Lisa every time. She really was fine. Ethan kept his promise and gave her time. Now they sought each other almost every day they went to the river. They walked a lot, talked to each other. Lisa told about herself, probably everything. She was a little embarrassed that she didn't know much about Ethan, but she rarely thought about it. "Please take your time," Cindy asked her once. "He's much older than you are, and you don't know much about him." Lisa blushed and looked away. "Have you already exhaled your friend?" "We love each other," Lisa said firmly. Cindy sighed. "Okay, it's up to you. Just be careful." Lisa smiled and looked at Ira. "I trust him completely. Don't worry." Her friend sighed, but decided not to interfere. "By the way, I remembered Cindy. What about your enrollment? I've applied to several institutions. So far, I like the history department the best. It sounds like it's going to be very interesting. I'm happy for you. You just don't seem happy. I don't want to break up with Ethan. I can't imagine we won't see each other very often. He could come into town to see you. Ethan works a lot." "Well," Cindy's thinking, "it's a good test." "What do you mean?" "If your love is real, distance will only strengthen your feelings." "I hope so," Lisa said. Happiness ended abruptly. Early one morning, Lisa was awakened by a car horn and jumped up in bed. It could only be Ethan. She got up hurriedly and looked out the window. There stood a familiar car. The girl waved her hand, indicating that she was about to get out. "What's wrong?" Lisa heard her mother's sleepy voice. "Is it for me?" The daughter answered. "It's so early. I'll be right back." "Mom, don't worry." Lisa quickly put on her dress, hurriedly swallowed her sleep-damaged hair, and ran outside. "Hi," she said. "Sit down, in the front seat." "What's up?" She leaned over and kissed Ethan. He returned the kiss, but he looked embarrassed and confused. "How are you, beautiful?" "I'm good. I just saw you last night." "What happened?" Ethan lowered his head and stared at his hands. "I'm being drafted," he finally said. Lisa opened her mouth but couldn't say a word out of surprise. "This isn't a joke?" she asked after a moment. "No, when?" "Tonight is Lezginka." But as he sighed, "I should have gone a long time ago, but there were reasons for the postponement. I'd forgotten all about it. And yesterday I was reminded by the authorities. I said goodbye to my parents, so I came to see you." Lisa realized she was ready to cry. She sobbed. "And what did you say?" "Stop it. How will I be without you?" Lisa asked pitifully. "Well, I'm not going away for 10 years. As soon as I know your address, I'll write to you. You haven't even met my mom yet." Ethan sings awkwardly. "It comes out later." "I'm sorry, I don't have time right now. I gotta go." She nodded, barely holding back tears. "I love you." He smiled. "And I baby you. Don't miss me. Don't ruin your face with tears." They kissed one more time. Lisa got out of the car and waved goodbye to him. She stood like that until Ethan's car was out of sight. "That was your young man." She heard her mom's voice. Lisa turned around. Wendy was standing on the porch, tangled in her shawl and looking sadly at her daughter. The latter blushed at the ladies. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. He's going into the army now, and he didn't tell you anything. He himself did not know." The mother frowned her eyebrows doubtfully, but said nothing. "Let's go inside. It's still cold." Lisa missed Ethan very much. Even though they'd only been together a few weeks, she felt like she couldn't imagine life without him anymore. She had gotten so used to his smile, his voice, his smell, that she didn't think she could survive a long separation from him. The first night after he left, Lisa couldn't sleep a wink. Even though she knew Ethan was far away, for some reason she expected to hear the squeak of tires and the familiar honking of a car. In the morning, Wendy didn't wake her. Lisa woke up late. Her head hurt and her eyes were barely open. She could feel them swelling with tears. Sitting up on the bed, suddenly Lisa felt a lump come up to her throat. After throwing up, it became easier. She washed her face and went back home. Breakfast was waiting on the table, covered with a clean towel. Pancakes with cottage cheese. Lisa poured herself hot, strong tea and began to eat. Mom came in. "Good morning." "Good morning, darling. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine." "You seem to have been up most of the night." Lisa shrugged. "It's nothing. I feel better now. Do you need help with anything today?" "I don't. But Grandma could use some help." "Okay, I'll go see her now." Anna lived at the other end of the village, but it was only a 15-minute walk. While Lisa was walking, the remnants of nausea passed and her mood improved a little. She found Anna in the vegetable garden. The woman was actively missing carrots. Weeds flew over the fence. "Hello, grandmother," shouted Lisa. The woman turned around, frowned, but saw her granddaughter, smiled. "Hi there. Haven't seen you in a while. Come on in. Mom said you need help. Would you like some? Come and join us." Lisa sat down on the opposite side of the wide bed and started pulling weeds. She wasn't as fast as her grandmother, but strangely enough, the monotonous action was soothing for a while. They were silent. And then Grandma asked how you were doing. "What's new?" Lisa shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know. I got into everywhere I wanted to go. Now we have to choose where the historical good choices lean," Anna approved. "However, my mom and I will support any of your choices." Grandmother paused for a moment, quickly looked at her granddaughter and added, "And this does not only apply to future studies." Lisa blushed. "What do you mean, your boy? You know everything just because you're dating someone." Lisa sighed. "I was." Her grandmother nodded and tested again, looking at her. "You're going to tell me?" Lisa nodded. She and her grandmother had a good relationship. Even though Anna seemed strict with her only granddaughter, she was affectionate. So Lisa calmly told her everything from the beginning. Grandmother listened without interrupting. Sometimes she pressed her lips together. Sometimes she threw the weeds out as if farther than usual. So hard she swung, but she listened to the end. "What are you going to do now?" she asked when her granddaughter had finished her story. "Wait for him," eagerly, "of course." Lisa exclaimed, "I love him so much." "Oh, that first love," Anna sighed. "My head goes completely blank." Lisa gave you a funny smile. "I don't know how to live without him." Grandma sighed. "Life doesn't end after a man leaves." "My dear, I am alive after your grandfather died, and Wendy lives after Sebastian died." Anna was silent, and Lisa felt ashamed. Two of her closest people had suffered the loss of lovers, and Lisa complained that Ethan would be away from her for a while. "I'm ashamed." "Grandma," she said. "Forgive me, I'm like a silly little girl at night." The woman smiled unapologetically for her feelings. "You have the right to feel them. Perhaps I didn't express myself correctly. Miss me and cry, sadness if you want, but don't forget about yourself. Don't turn your life into waiting for a man. What do you have besides him?" Lisa smiled. "You and Mom. Cindy, the future, studying books." Grandma smiled too. "Your boyfriend's gonna text you." "Yeah, he said he'd give me his address as soon as he got there." Ethan wrote 3 weeks later saying he was doing fine. He'd arrived at his duty station. The food is good. And Ethan had already made friends with the other guys. Lisa immediately wrote back that she was doing well, that she would be going to the city in a few days, because she was starting school, and that she missed him very much. "How worried I was all those days," Lisa told her friend. "I felt sick every day from the excitement. But today I got the letter and it was like I was free." Cindy listened attentively to her friend and thought about it, bit her lip, sighed, and asked her a question that had been tormenting her for a long time. "Have you ever thought about being pregnant?" The serene smile on Lisa's face was replaced by horror. "No," she whispered quietly. "It can't be." "It can't," Cindy interjected. "I thought you said you were with Ethan." Lisa shook her head desperately, her cheeks forgotten by Leda. "We were close. It's just that Ethan said it wouldn't happen. I'm not ready." She looked desperately at Ira, who decided to be supportive. "Maybe you're right, and the nausea was just excitement. I was just guessing." Lisa sighed and stopped talking. Something whispered from her finger, as if she was calculating in her head. "Are you right?" Desperately, she said. "I'm late, and I'm pretty late. I'd forgotten all about it. What am I going to do now?" Her friend came over to her and hugged her tightly. They stood like that for a few minutes. Then Cindy led Lisa to the bed, sat down, and sat beside her. She continued to hold her hand and spoke calmly in a low voice. Don't panic. First of all, it's not definite yet. We should at least do a test. Yes, in principle, that's enough. And then, based on the result, we'll have to act. Where do we get the test? Lisa asked. They don't sell them in your store. Is the nearest pharmacy far away in your ear supposed to be? Said Cindy. And she won't say anything to anyone. You're sure? That Wendy was the name of their village paramedic. She was a chubby little girl of about 30. She took everything in life lightly. Jenna his Sebastian loved, though she was considered unserious and frivolous. Nevertheless, it was always possible to turn to her for help. Despite her youth, she always knew how to help. The children she immunized almost never cried. They were mesmerized by the blonde aunt with bright red lips who sang songs, made funny faces, and told interesting stories during the vaccinations. Despite the seeming seriousness, those who turned to Wendy for help knew that this girl would never share the problems of her patients. Pregnancy test. Fun, she asked the girls. Of course there is. She rummaged through one of the countless drawers of her huge old wooden cabinet and pulled out a white and pink package. There are 2 of these here. To be safe, I recommend doing both. If both are positive, the practical Cindy clarified, then it's 100% pregnancy. The paramedic shrugged. No, of course, everyone makes mistakes. But the probability in this case is very high. If there will be a plus run and to me, I'll give a referral for an ultrasound in the city. Lisa nodded to Wendy and looked at her carefully and asked, It's a long time. The girl shrugged. I don't know, probably a few weeks. The paramedic waved her hand nonchalantly. Then don't worry. There's plenty of time for an abortion at that age. Lisa pressed her lips almost bloody and nodded. Or are you going to have a baby? I don't know. The girl whispered almost silently. All right, she cut her ear off. Why guess ahead of time? Take it and do it. You'll come back later. When they came out and asked to stay with you, Lisa nodded. I'm scared. It's going to be all right. Both tests came back positive. Lisa looked at the 2 small paper strips and did not realize what she was experiencing. But I asked her once. I don't know, she answered honestly. Do you want to go to Wendy's or do you want to talk to your mom? Lisa has no idea how to say this to Mom. Come on, Aunt Wendy. You're just a sunshine. She probably won't even raise her voice at you. My mom would kill me. Lisa smiled sadly. Her friend's words cheered her up. I'll talk to my mom. Cindy was right. Wendy didn't scream, didn't cry. It was like she wasn't even surprised. How are you feeling? I'm okay. I just don't know what to do now. Mom, you should probably tell Ethan anyway. Wendy said softly. You're right. Shall I come with you to the ultrasound? Yes, please. Mom almost didn't let go of her hand the whole time they were in the doctor's office. The pregnancy was confirmed. Lisa was even shown a small seed on the screen. Her unborn child, the moment she saw it, she realized she was not going to have an abortion. This is what she told her mother. As soon as they left the hospital, Wendy nodded and smiled. Grandma and I will support you no matter what happens. Thank you, Mommy. Lisa was still hesitant to write a letter to Ethan. She didn't know what was stopping her from doing so. Fear that he wouldn't be happy about the unexpected pregnancy, that he'd leave her, tell her to have an abortion. Probably all of them at once. In any case, she had enough to do as it was. School had started. Wendy and Cindy were helping her move things into the dorms. The day before, she and her mother and grandmother had had a long discussion about what to do. The best solution was suggested by the wise Anna. Go, granddaughter, study as if nothing had happened. When you realize that it became absolutely unbearable, you will have 2 options: or go on sabbatical leave or transfer to a correspondence department. There's another option, Mom added. If you want to continue studying, we'll rent you an apartment and take turns babysitting. No, that's too expensive and too serious, too mature, Lisa said. And here we leave the options with academics and distance learning. Studying was very interesting. The first month passed almost unnoticed. The only thing that bothered Lisa was Ethan's silence. He never replied to her first letter. At the end of September, Lisa decided to spend a weekend in the light shelf. She missed her mother, her grandmother, and her friend. How good was it to be home? As she rode the train, a nasty fall rain fell the whole way, hinting at the end of a gentle Indian summer. And at home, Wendy stoked the stove. Anna. She was baking a mountain of Lisa's favorite cabbage pies. Her and her mom's red cat, named Bandit, joyfully jumped on her lap and poked her. "How are you doing?" Mom asked. "I'm fine. I like studying there. How's the dormitory?" Grandma asked. "It's okay. The roommates are nice." "Yes, they are. One is a freshman, like me, and the other is in her 3rd year. They're both almost honors students." "That's great." After meeting her family, Lisa wanted to see her friend. Cindy was working at her mother's store as she had planned. Lisa dressed warmer in long rubber boots, took an umbrella, and went to meet her friend. "What people?" Cindy shouted when she saw her. She was just serving a customer. She turned around, and Lisa saw a smiling face and a paramedic. "Oh, our mother-to-be," she exclaimed. "Hi, girls." Lisa said hello. "How are you guys doing?" Cindy shrugged. "We're doing the same old thing." "What could happen in the village?" "Don't stall for time. Tell me about yourself." Lisa shrugged her shoulders. "I don't have much news either. I don't do anything but study." "How's the pregnancy going?" I asked in a professional tone in her ear. "Everything is fine," Lisa smiled. "No nausea. Not anymore. I don't feel sleepy, on the contrary. I feel more energized." "That's good. Did you write Ethan?" Cindy intervened. Lisa sighed no. "He didn't answer the first letter either." "What a bastard." Maybe he's just busy." The paramedic listened to their conversation with growing interest. "Who is Ethan?" Suddenly she asked. "The baby's father." "My young man," Lisa answered, blushing for some reason. Wendy nodded. "I get that. I mean, who is he?" "In our village, I don't know any guys called Ethan, and he's not from around here," said Lisa. "Lives in Black Hill, tall guy with black hair." "Yeah," Wendy bought Lisa's lip. Didn't pay much attention to it. Cindy frowned. "Do you know something about him?" Wendy averted her eyes. "Okay. Rumors." "Like what?" Lisa asked. "You should probably talk to him yourself," the paramedic said. "I'm not sure of anything." "Maybe it's all just contract gossip already," shouted Cindy. Lisa hugged her arms around her stomach fearfully. Wendy looked at her hands and took a deep breath. "Okay, so I'll tell Ethan. My acquaintances say he's a terrible womanizer, that he has a girl or two in every village in the county." Lisa turned pale, and Wendy looked at her guiltily, and continued, "I also heard that there is a woman with whom he has 2 children. It's not like they're officially married. They're living in a common-law relationship." Lisa felt dizzy and began to fall slowly to the floor. "You scared us, Mother." The first thing she heard when she came to her senses. She was lying in the back of the store on some crates. Wendy and Cindy were standing over her. The paramedic was holding some kind of vial of foul-smelling liquid. "How are you?" Wendy asked her. "I don't know." Lisa shook her head weakly. She carefully sat up, no longer dizzy. The girl looked at her saviors in turn and said in a suddenly firm voice, "I need to find out if it's true. Getting information in the village is much easier than in the city. There is always someone who knows someone else, who knows a third person, who finally has the information they need." Unfortunately, the rumors Wendy had been hearing were confirmed. Ethan did have a lot of girlfriends with some. He was even dating this summer. The rumors about his roommates were also true. Ethan was in and out of relationships. He had a 3-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son. There were rumors that they might not be Ethan's children, but no one knew for sure. It didn't matter much, though. Everything she wanted to know, Lisa had already learned. Now she lay on her friend's bed and wept bitterly. Cindy sighed, stroked her red hair with Putin, and did not know what to say. "He's a bastard," she said in her heart, "and not worth your tears." Lisa sat down on the bed and wiped her face with her palms. "Are you right?" Lisa said calmly. "I have a baby to think about." "That's right." Lisa wrote another letter. In it, she told everything she had learned about him calmly, without tears or accusations. She asked her not to write about the baby again. Lisa wouldn't tell. I'm sure, her mother asked her. He is the father after all. The daughter shook her head. He has enough children and women as it is. I don't want to become one of them. Wendy pulled her to her side and kissed her on the top of her head. Lisa continued, it's only my child. I raised it myself. Don't forget we are always with you. Lisa returned to the city and continued her studies. She tried to immerse herself in it with her head, to keep even the thought of Ethan out of her head. Besides, she had to think about the future baby's health, take tests, go to doctor's appointments, do ultrasounds. At the second examination, Lisa was informed that it was a boy. Anna said happily when her granddaughter shared this news with her family. We are finally going to have a man. Wendy smiled, thinking of a name. She asked her daughter. Lisa shrugged her shoulders. I'm still deciding. There's been no news from Ethan. No. Maybe something happened to him. Watch out, Mom asked. Lisa shook her head negatively. Valley, our paramedic, has acquaintances from his village. They know his parents, and they receive regular letters from Ethan. So there is nothing wrong with him. Grandmother listened to this for a frown, and then said, well, fuck him then. Next, she uttered several long and literary expressions that Lisa had not heard even from her most bully classmates. Anna exclaimed delightedly to Wendy, Grandma, you're so funny. Anna shrugged innocently. I can be angry too, she said. And in a calmer tone she added, and don't hurry with the name. When you see your child for the first time, you will know what his name is. Lisa tried to go home once or twice a month on weekends. The first few months of pregnancy were easy. She wanted to move more, to go for walks. She slept little, had time to learn everything and rest. It got harder after New Year's Eve. Her belly came out right away. Walking became harder. The tentative delivery date was set for mid-April. Lisa consulted with her mother and grandmother and went to the dean's office to solve the issue of further education. The dean of her faculty was an intelligent and understanding woman. At one time, Jenna herself remained a single mother with 3 children and raised all 3 on their feet. So she talked to Lisa calmly and thoroughly. Did she find out about the child's father, where Lisa lived, and how much help she could get from her family? I don't think you need to lose a year or 2 by taking a sabbatical, the dean said. It will be enough to switch to a part-time program. I'll talk to your professors. Maybe they'll let you close some of your credits early in the next month or 2. Then you'll come back in the summer for exams. Is it right that you'll have someone to leave the baby with for a couple of hours? Lisa nodded yes, Mom will be able to help. The woman smiled. It was my thesis defense. I'm standing there, telling the essence of my work. And my mom is wheeling the stroller around the university with my daughter. Lisa smiled. I made sure you got all the textbooks and study guides you needed so you could study at home. Of course, if things get tough, you can always take a vacation. But I wouldn't recommend it. Why not? Lisa asked timidly. Jenna sighed. Knowledge is quickly forgotten, and most importantly, you forget how to learn. It seems that you don't have the mind and strength to master so much material. Most of the girls don't come back to us after childbirth and vacation. I wouldn't want you to waste your potential. You're very capable. Lisa blushed and lowered her head. Thank you. Children are a blessing. But someday they'll grow up and go away, and you'll be with you forever. I'll remember that. Thank you for being so understanding. Lisa remembered the advice. When she got home, she allowed herself a whole week of rest by getting up late, lying blissfully in bed. Then she would go to the kitchen, where it was already hot from her mother's stove, and her mother's stove leisurely, wash her face and eat breakfast. Then Lisa would take the cat on her lap and read something in the kitchen, cook something simple for lunch, and wait for her mother to come home from work. Wendy tried to bring something tasty. Often she would pass on guests from her grandmother, who cooked her granddaughter's only goodies. By the end of the pregnancy, I'll be a lump, Lisa grumbled, opening another bag of pies. Wendy shrugged. All right, I'll eat them all myself then, she said. More what? Already with her mouth full, she remained silent. Lisa, moving the package towards her. After a week of such life, she started to repeat the study material, tried to go out for a walk. Of course, in winter you can't walk much, but at least she could walk to the store. She also stopped by the nurse's station to see Wendy. They've been talking to her a lot lately, too. Haven't heard from Ethan? Asked Lisa's friend. She shook her head, never answered. Do you think he knows about the baby? I hope not. Only if he corresponds with some of the guys in our village. And as far as I know, he didn't have any friends here. Well, said Wendy thoughtfully, it's a village. Word travels fast. Lisa furrowed her brow and looked at her. I haven't said anything to anyone. The paramedic immediately clarified. But you know, rumors are a thing. Are they already gossiping about me? Lisa asked. Her friend averted her eyes, pretending not to have heard anything. Wendy answered. It doesn't matter. People assume different things. Some remember that you dated a guy from out of town all summer. Some think you were out on the town. Wendy suddenly saw her friend smiling. What are you doing? It's good to have these rumors. Let them spread. Wendy suddenly opened her mouth wide and smiled too. I see. You want Ethan not to realize it's his baby when he gets back from the army. Lisa smiled sadly. Sebastian, I don't. I don't want that man in my life ever again. I understand. With the beginning of spring, great changes came to their village. At first, it was just rumors, but then it became clear it was serious. It started when someone bought the abandoned lot next door to Barbara and Lisa's house. A huge work crew arrived. The old uninhabited house was demolished, and on its foundations they quickly, literally in a month, built a strong new cottage. The men who met the builders informed the whole village that the owner of the new house would soon be a city man, apparently very wealthy. He was going to build a farm in their village, or start growing a garden, or something like that. The women of the Matveev family had heard all this news, but they were not particularly excited. Men are gossips. Anna remarked philosophically, worse than women. If in fact a man comes who wants to make a big enterprise in our village, that's a good thing. There will be new jobs. And if not, we'll live the old way, which isn't bad either. Wendy and Lisa were also calm about the rumors. The only thing they were curious about was watching the new house being built nearby. Wendy was coming home from work when she ran into a new neighbor. First, an unfamiliar man appeared on the street in front of her. He was walking briskly toward her house. Vera was curious because there were no other houses further down the street. They weren't expecting anyone to visit, so it could only be a new neighbor. Unfortunately, only his broad, strong back was visible from behind. The man was wearing an expensive black coat, a bright green hat, and leather boots. They looked so thin, Wendy wondered how he didn't get cold in them. The supposed neighbor walked past her house, and she was convinced her assumption was correct. Wendy was about to go into her house. Just as suddenly, she saw the man slip, grunt loudly, and fall. Muffled, hitting the back of his head on the ground. Wendy aft and ran over to him. Her neighbor's eyes were closed. She shook him by the shoulders. Are you alive? He groaned. I'll run for the paramedic now, Wendy said, and started to get up. The man slowly opened his eyes. Don't? Barely audible, he asked. I think I'm all right, but I'm just banged up pretty bad. Can I help you up? Yes, please. Wendy leaned over and put his arm behind her back, wrapped her arms around him, and pulled him up forcefully. The neighbor groaned, but with her help he got up. You live in this house, don't you? Just in case, Wendy asked. He nodded. Let's go, she said firmly. I'll help you walk together. They walked slowly to his house. The man took out his keys and opened the door. He turned to Wendy, realizing that this was not the best way to start an acquaintance. But maybe you could stop by for a visit. She grinned at me. We need to examine your head and assess how serious things are inside. The house was already fully furnished. Everything is very simple and solid. Lots of wooden furniture on the floor, warm carpets. The house itself is not as big as it looks from the outside and very cozy. Do you live alone? Wendy asked. I do. My son is coming to visit a little later. They went into the kitchen. The neighbor threw his coat and hat on a chair and sat down on the second chair. Wendy, thinking, also took off her outer clothes and put them on top of his coat. I'm watching your head. I'd be grateful. She stood behind him and gently probed the back of his head. A large lump was pouring out of a large bump there. "I'll get some snow now," Wendy said. "We should put some cold on it." "No, don't. I've got ice in the fridge." She took out an ice pack, wrapped it in a towel, and put it on the back of her head. "I'm not dizzy. Not now, but the nausea is gone. No double vision." The man shook his head negatively and smiled and looked at her curiously. "I'm fine. What is your name?" "My good, Saving Wendy." "What a marvelous name." "I'm John. Nice to meet you too. So you're my neighbor?" "I am. Have some tea with me." She shook her head. "I'm sorry, I have to go. My daughter's waiting at home," he said. And Wendy's husband frowned. "I don't have a husband. I'm sure you're fine." "Yeah, I'll lie down for a while and I'll be as good as new. You get some rest. If you need anything, come in." "Thank you, Wendy." "Have a good day." Wendy was somehow embarrassed by the stare of the stranger. He looked her age, maybe a few years older. I guess she was just used to men looking at her with interest. And he's handsome, she thought as she approached the house, and immediately scolded herself for those thoughts. What did she care? Her task is to think about her daughter and wait for the birth of her grandson. "Mom, what took you so long today?" Lisa asked her. "Did you meet the new neighbor?" Said Wendy. "How are you feeling?" "I feel great. Let's have lunch." "Let's do it." The next day, when Wendy was at work, there was a knock at their door. Lisa was reading a textbook at the time. She wasn't expecting any guests. Cindy and Wendy were at work, and Grandma's homework wasn't over yet either. And no one else came by. "Come in," she shouted. The door opened and a tall young man came in. "Good afternoon," he said. "It's you, Wendy." Lisa raised her eyebrows in surprise. "No, I'm Lisa. And Wendy is my mom." "Nice to meet you, Lisa. My name is Thomas." He held out his hand to her and she shook it. "So it was your mom who saved my dad yesterday?" "She did." Lisa was surprised. She hadn't said anything like that. Yesterday, she only mentioned that she'd met our new neighbor. "But your mom is modest, isn't she?" "My dad slipped and fell yesterday and hit his head." "Wow, hard." "Yeah, he even blacked out. Good thing Wendy saw it. She helped him home and gave him first aid." "How's your dad feeling?" "He has a huge lump on his head and his tailbone hurts a lot," the man said. "But other than that, he's fine." "I'm glad. In fact, I wanted to thank Wendy for her help." "Oh, I get it. She's still at work and she'll be back in an hour. You can wait for her here if you want, if that's okay." "No, Lisa's just getting up to help me with the billet. And then we can all have lunch together. Will you call your father over here, or shall we come in?" She noticed he wasn't talking and was looking at her belly in a strange way. "If I'm too brash, I apologize," Lisa added. "We keep things simple in the village." He seemed embarrassed. "Oh no, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant at all. I'd be happy to help you with your lunch. And then, if you don't mind, we'll come back to our place." "It hurts my father to walk without a problem," Lisa said, and went to the refrigerator to get the groceries she needed. "As for the embarrassment you noted, I was just wondering if your husband would mind." Lisa smiled and handed him a bucket of potatoes, and a knife and a clean bowl. "I'm single. Can you peel potatoes?" The boy nodded. "Yeah, my mom died when I was 10. Since then, my dad and I lived alone and took turns cooking, so I know how to do everything." "I'm sorry for your loss," Lisa said. They spent the hour in silence. When Wendy returned from work, she found a surprising scene. Thomas introduced himself, explained the situation. Lunch was almost ready, and soon they all went to the neighbor's house together. Lisa immediately noticed that her mother liked Vasily, despite the painful tailbone. At the table, he tried to woo her and kept his eyes on her. At some point, Lisa crossed her gaze with Thomas and realized that he was watching their parents too. The boy suddenly smiled slyly at Lisa and asked Lisa loudly, "I haven't shown you our house yet, have I? Would you like to see it?" Lisa smiled politely, "Sure." They got up from the table and Thomas led her into the back of the house. "Do you live here too?" Lisa asked him. "Not yet. I have a lot of things to do in the city, so I'll be in and out. But I will move in later. I'll have to help my father." "So is it true that you're the ones who'll be building something here?" "Yes, we are." The young people found themselves in a large room that looked like a living room. Lisa was surprised to see that there was a huge fireplace with a fire burning merrily against the wall. They sat down on big soft armchairs near the fireplace. My father is a big businessman, except that in recent years he's gotten tired of. He decided he wanted something closer to nature for his soul. He found some vacant land in your village, built a house. Now he wants to start farming. Lisa smiled. He wants to have chickens and plant a vegetable garden. Thomas laughed. Well, sort of. He's going to build a farm first, then plant wheat, oats, other crops. If all goes well, he'll have rabbits and chickens. I guess that's a lot of money. That's all Lisa could say. Sounds very nice. Do you want to do it yourself? He sighed. I honestly don't know yet. I'm very close to my father, but I've lived in the city all my life and never thought about living like this, although it's not so bad here. Lisa smiled. I think it will be a bit difficult for you, here for the first time, especially in winter. But I've told you about myself. Why do you live here all the time? Yes, I'm a local. I was born here, grew up here, graduated from high school. From September, I went to history school in the city. Then when the term got longer, I transferred to a correspondence school. Now I'll be here. Aren't you bored? Lisa raised her eyebrows in surprise. How could it be boring? Thomas shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. I just can't imagine what I would do as a young pregnant girl. I study, read books, help my mom with chores, go out with my girlfriends. He nodded along nicely. That's when John, Thomas' voice came from far away. Lisa, where are you? Are we here, Dad? Thomas shouted. Lisa stood up. Thanks for the interesting conversation. They went back into the kitchen. We have to go, daughter, said Wendy. Thank you for a wonderful lunch, said John. I hope this will become our good tradition. Goodbye, said Lisa. Over time, a good neighborly relationship developed between their homes. John seemed to be the one who initiated the socializing the most. It was easy to guess that he fell in love with Wendy at first sight. This was quickly realized by everyone except Wendy herself. It was as if she was afraid of the situation. She was afraid even to suppose that after so many years of lonely life, someone would disturb her peace. So she stubbornly pretended not to notice anything. Her relationship with John remained only friendly. But he took his time and never gave up hope. John was always as polite and careful with her as possible. Thomas and Lisa were not opposed to the companionship of their parents. They even to some extent became rundown and conspiratorial. Sometimes I feel silly, Lisa said. They took walks together, pretending to watch the farm construction in progress. In reality, they were just giving their parents time together. Why is that surprising? Thomas asked. They're adults, and we run around leaving them alone like they're little. You think that if they're older than us, they're the smartest. I think they can work things out for themselves. Thomas smiled. We don't decide anything for them, let them work it out for themselves. But our parents may also have some things in their heads that prevent them from being objective. And you and I just help them a little bit. Lisa sighed. Okay, maybe you're right. He smiled. How are you feeling? I'm fine. The only annoying thing is that it's getting harder to walk every day. I feel like I'm being inflated like a balloon. Probably won't be able to move at all by April. You want me to bring my ATV? I'll give you a ride on it. Lisa laughed. Where would I go for a ride? Thomas wasn't embarrassed. Do you need to get outdoors every day? If you can't walk, we'll go for a ride. Lisa smiled at Thomas. We're not in the city right now. Here you can walk out on the porch and all the air is fresh. Don't pick on me. Will you get tired of staying home? Well, as long as I can still go out. Thomas decided to turn the conversation to something else. How's school going? You were in town last week. It's good. I'm almost done with all my credits. Only 2 more to go. And even one of the easier exams was automatic. What about the rest? I'll take them this summer like everyone else. You're a good girl, Lisa. Really? I admire you. Come on, don't argue. You're good. They laughed. Lisa felt easy and good. With Thomas, it was as if she suddenly had the big brother she had longed for as a child. Even though he hadn't moved out yet, He was at his father's house often and was always there when she needed him. They always had something to talk about. Lisa and Thomas' lives were both similar and different at the same time. He grew up in the city, not needing money. She in a simple country family. But what they had in common was that they had both lost one of their parents early and loved the other one desperately. Thomas began to experience village life and understood his father better and better. It was quiet, peaceful, everything was real. In the city, it was as if there was a lot of unnecessary things. Too many people, sounds, cars, unnecessary things to do, unnecessary acquaintances. And here only the things that really mattered. Thomas loved coming to this little village, loved having dinner with Lisa and her mother, loved that his father was finally smiling. So many years after his mother's death, he was having fun with Lisa. She was unlike any girl he had ever socialized with. She wanted to protect her, keep her safe, make her laugh. Thomas wasn't kidding about the ATV. He'd left it behind the very next week, even though he hadn't really needed to. But when he rode it up to Lisa's house, she came out to meet him and started laughing. He realized that her laughter was worth any effort. Lisa and Thomas could talk about anything in the world. The only thing they didn't touch on was discussing Lisa's father of the baby. He realized there was some unpleasant history there. Lisa had told him all about it herself. His reaction was predictable. That story was a nightmare. I'd like to break that Ethan's legs and arms. Come on, I've forgotten all about him. I doubt it, honestly. I wouldn't forget about such a thing. Lisa smiled. The most important thing to me is that I'm not alone. I love my baby. I also have my mom, my friend's grandmother. And I seriously said, Thomas. Lisa smiled. We've only known you for a little while. So, what does it matter? I'm grateful for those words. And I'm very glad US moved here. You've become a very close friend to me. Thomas wrinkled his nose as if he'd swallowed something sour, but then he smiled. I'm very pleased to hear that. You're a close friend, too. At the end of March, the main part of the farm was ready. Lisa didn't understand how it could be built in such a short time. When she asked Thomas about it, he only laughed and shrugged his shoulders. Money does wonders. And my father is also a great boss and organizer. He knows how to get people working quickly and efficiently. So you're not going to hire locals? Why not? On the contrary, my dad wanted to. If there will be people willing to take their new jobs, all that. Lisa smiled sadly. They don't know how to work like that. Her friends smiled immediately. Believe me, Dad will teach them. He gives good conditions, trains them, tells them the rules. Those who obey them get perks, and such that you won't want to quit. Who breaks the rules, quits after the first screw-up? No forgiveness. Strict but effective. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Well, not everyone will pass the test, of course. I'm guessing about 30 or 40% will laugh. But trust me, the ones who stay will be the best workers. That's great. Are you busy right now? Lisa asked. No, not really. Why don't you take me? Harry, please. No problem. When he dropped her off at her friend's house, he asked what time to pick her up. Yeah, I'll walk there myself, strolled over. Thomas frowned. What do you mean I'll walk myself? I have to walk. I never leave the house. Don't worry. Cindy will walk me part of the way. Okay, but call me when you get there so I don't worry. Lisa rolled her eyes. That's the last thing I need. You're not my daddy, Lisa. She laughed and disappeared into her friend's house. Thomas sighed and drove home. How stubborn she can be sometimes, like a girl. Well, she is a girl. She's only 19. He suddenly caught himself smiling. Every time he thought of Lisa, even though she was just his friend. Who are you kidding? An inner voice asked suddenly, but he shook his head, distracting himself from these thoughts. In fact, he should be doing something useful instead of thinking about Lisa. He even managed to do that. He had to fill out the paperwork for the farm. He was so engrossed in it that when he looked up, it was past 2 o'clock. Checked his phone for Lisa. There was nothing. Had her friend still had some vague inner restlessness that wouldn't let go. Thomas tried to tell himself that everything was fine, that he was just winding himself up. It wasn't working. He called Lisa. No one answered the phone. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore, so he jumped out of the house, got in his car, and drove off. He knew that Lisa usually came back from her friend's house through the backyard, and it was faster that way. He was already halfway down the road, but there was no one in sight. Suddenly, he noticed a bright red spot by the fence. He pulled up, stopped, jumped out of the car. Lisa was sitting upright on the ground with her back leaning against the fence. Her eyes were half closed her face. The pale bandage of her neck and chest dripped drops of sweat. Lisa screamed, "Thomas," running up to her. She opened her eyes with difficulty and looked up at him. "Thomas, it's so good of you to come." Tears rolled down her cheeks from relief. She was so scared alone here. For a moment, Lisa thought she would have to give birth right here in the field. "Lisa, don't cry." He's scared. Why is she crying? She's in pain. "What's wrong with you?" "I don't know. I think labor is starting so badly my stomach hurts and pulls." He took a deep breath in and out. There was no need to panic. He was the only one who could help Lisa. He must pull himself together. "It's okay," in a steady voice, Thomas said. "We'll get in the car now and drive to the hospital." Lisa is sobbing and seems to have calmed down a little. "Can you stand up?" "I don't know." He leaned over, gently embraced her, gave her his arm, helping her up. Lisa slowly stood up. "Come on, I'll put you in the car." In the same calm, confident tone, Thomas continued. Even through her clothes, he could feel her heart pounding. He was scared too. "There," he said affectionately, putting Lisa in the car. She nodded, tried to smile, but then a spasm ran down her face. Lisa made Thomas go around the car again, get in and start it. He agonized over which road would be the quickest to get to town. In any case, it was at least 2 hours of road. Would he make it? How would Lisa stand those 2 hours? Maybe the right thing to do was to call an ambulance, but they would definitely take longer. Thomas groaned pitifully. "Lisa, scared of what?" he asked. "Don't leave me, please. I'll never leave you." With one hand, he clutched the steering wheel, and with the other, he squeezed her cold, pale hand. "How are you?" "I'm really scared. It's going to be okay." Lisa noisily inhaled the air with her nose. "Do you believe me?" "I do." "Of course I do." Lisa was silent for a while, wrapping her arms around her stomach and breathing heavily. It hurt a lot, like waves coming in waves. "Less now." "Good." "Oh, what's wrong?" "I didn't tell my mom anything," Lisa exclaimed. "She and Grandma will be worried. I'll call them as soon as we get to the hospital. Thank you for everything you do for me." "Lisa, come on." "How could I not? They're lucky." Thomas ran into the emergency room and began to ramble on about what had happened. Experienced nurse on duty. "Got it. Shetta, calm down," he said. "We'll help you now." He took the cat and went to get Thomas. There they transferred Lisa from the car and took her to the emergency room. "Call the on-call obstetrician-gynecologist," shouted the nurse. He had already taken a pen and a clipboard and was quickly asking Lisa something. "Daddy, please sit down," a woman in a white uniform told him sternly. Thomas froze on the spot in surprise. "What is it?" The woman addressed Lisa affectionately. "I think I'm in labor." "No. Let's deal with it now." She turned to her brother. "Kostya, please escort our daddy into the corridor." Kostya nodded, stood up, and resolutely took Thomas by the elbow, led him out of the office. "Wait," he told him. "The doctor will come out and tell him everything." Waiting was excruciatingly difficult. He ran through 1,000 possibilities in his head. What if he brought Lisa in? Too late? What if there were complications? What if something happened to the baby? When the doctor came out, he rushed toward her, nearly knocking her to the ground. "Easy, easy on the sedative," she said. "That she's okay?" "Well, I mean, labor's starting, of course, but everything's on track. Mom and baby are fine. We're going to move her to a room now." Thank you. I'm glad we made it in time." She nodded. "Are you staying with her?" Did Thomas not expect such a question? "I don't know. Unless she wants to. Hadn't you two discussed it before?" "We haven't had a chance." "All right, I'll ask Lisa." The doctor nodded. "You can ask her yourself, though." The doctor stepped aside to let him in. He went in. Lisa was sitting up and seemed calm. There seems to have been a little misunderstanding, Thomas said. The doctor thinks I'm your boyfriend or husband. I don't know. Lisa smiled yes, that was funny. What else could you think though? I agree. But she asked me if I would attend the birth with you. Lisa's face turned pitiful. You don't want to what? I'm sorry, I can't ask you to do that, Lisa. Thomas didn't know what to say to that. Do you want it? Finally, he asked. She looked up at him timidly. I'm scared. And if you were with me, it would be easier. He nodded. Well then, I'll be with you. All of this they went through together, the Dark One never leaving her side for a second. He realized he had never been so worried about anyone. When it was over, the baby was carried away to be examined, and Lisa threw herself onto her pillow and fell asleep instantly. He was finally able to exhale. He had gotten used to being called Daddy, Father, all this time. There was no strength or desire to correct them and explain the situation. It was only a pity that Lisa herself considered him just a friend. He suddenly realized that he loved her, that he was willing to do anything for her, that he loved her, and this baby that had just come into the world. Just as he sat back in his chair and closed his eyes, the phone rang. How is she? Dad asked. All is well, Thomas reported. The boy. Dad coughed awkwardly. No, okay, got it. Tell him everything's fine. Lisa's asleep now. What about you? What about me? I didn't give birth. Come home. You'll have a shower and Lisa will need to bring things. Thomas rubbed it exactly. I don't even know what she needs. I'll ask Wendy and send you a list. Thanks, Dad. Should we come too? No, I can handle it. You guys better get everything ready. All right, hang in there. We'll be waiting for you. They were discharged 3 days later. All that time, he came to see Lisa every day at the hospital. What do you want to call him? He asked, looking at the way she held the baby against her chest. Nick, that's a beautiful name. Thank you. And I decided to give it Daddy's middle name. Seeing his perplexed look, she explained my daddy's. Oh, it's beautiful. Thomas Lisa gave him a serious look. Thank you so much for everything you've done for me. He shrugged. Come on, it's nothing. It's not nothing. But we're friends. Yes, she lowered her eyes to the baby, and in a quieter voice, she said we're friends. They had a whole party at home with Wendy, John, Grandma, Cindy, and Wendy. They all got together and renovated and set up the nursery, bought a bed and everything the baby needed, walked around until late at night, and Thomas suddenly realized that he and his father had somehow become part of this family. I think our parents are finally bonding, Lisa said, when she and Thomas went for a walk. He pushed the stroller in front of him. Little Nick was asleep, content in the spring sunshine of May. Yeah, your mom finally let your daddy take care of her. I think he's been doing it for a while. But before that, she pretended like she didn't understand. I think she just seems to be out of it. She hasn't dated anyone since Daddy. Thomas nodded. Oh, now I get it. Dad didn't have anyone much after Mom either. Either way, I'm happy for them. Me too. They walked a little more along the saluting, sun-bright road. How are you doing anyway? Yeah, I'm very lucky. I'm surrounded by wonderful people. I couldn't have done it alone, I would have. Thomas objected. You're very strong. But it's nice to have someone to help you, isn't it? Thank you. But enough about me. How are you? Good, I've noticed you've been sleeping here most nights. I do. I think I've finally moved in. Oh, wow. Glad, of course. Now I'll be able to exploit you even more. He laughed. I'll be happy about that. Oh, yeah. A real friend would have taught me self-reliance. Well, I guess I'm not a real friend. He was silent, but then he said without raising his head, I'd do anything for you. Thank you, Lisa said quietly. Her cheeks were flushed and she leaned over, pretending to check on her son. I don't understand anything about farming, Thomas said desperately. He was holding little Nick in his arms, but he was so worried that he didn't seem to be downloading him anymore, but rather keeping him awake. But you don't have to, do you? Softly said Lisa, gently taking his son from him. Didn't you graduate from the Agricultural Institute? He grinned. No, I should. My father never did it either. But he's a quick learner. He has more experience in other areas too, Lisa pointed out. Well, you're probably right. Don't be so hard on yourself. I can see how well you're doing. He sighed. It only seems that way. For example, we're already starting to produce our own products. We should drive around to the neighboring villages and towns and see what the markets are like. My father wants us to be known and recommended by all the neighbors. We could just go to town, take everything to the supermarkets, but he doesn't want to do that. What's the problem? Lisa didn't understand. I don't know where to go. How do I talk to people? Who will want to buy my milk? Lisa smiled. Good thing you talked me into buying a cradle then. Help me get it out. Let's go introduce you to the neighborhood. Thomas raised his eyebrows. What did you have in mind? Take as many milk bottles as you can carry. We'll go to all the strategic points. Let people taste, compare, recognize. Thomas didn't recognize Lisa. She was busily packing a bag for her son, where she had put diapers and warm clothes, a bottle and a pacifier just in case. Okay, he said and went to load the milk bottles. Lisa quickly made an itinerary in her head. They started from their village. They left a few bottles at one store. Did they give it away for free? Her friend asked doubtfully. Yes, Lisa said fervently. Sure, tell them it's from our farm. And it's free if they leave a detailed review. Cindy rolled her eyes. Yeah, do they know what a review is? To say whether it tasted good or not. Do you like the smell of the consistency and stuff? Did you gain weight? Lisa, Oak, don't worry, everyone will report back. Then they went to a bigger village where there was a small market. There Lisa started an activity. She bought a lot of disposable cups and organized a sampling. Everyone could come and taste the milk. There were a lot of people. How was it? Lisa asked. Yeah, it's okay, I guess. You'd buy it. Why wouldn't we? Thomas was surprised. Lisa could easily communicate with the locals, and they were friendly, curious. Interesting events didn't happen to them very often, so an event like this caught their attention. Their milk company rode around until the evening. Finally, they gave away the last bottle of milk. Oh, I'm tired, said Thomas. I admitted to Lisa, too. And Nick is doing great. They both looked at the cradle. The baby calmly consulted it. A perfect character the man has, said Thomas. I hope it stays that way. He also likes your voice. He does? Thomas was surprised. Yes, I noticed a long time ago that when you talk, he acts calm. What can I read in fairy tales? That's what Lisa mentioned. I have a session starting next week. Thomas nodded. Don't worry, we've already talked it over with your mom. I can take you to town to hang out with Nick while you take the exam, and then I can take you back. Thomas, I can't ask you to do that, and don't ask me to do that. I've made up my mind. You've got your own stuff to do. It's all bullshit. Lisa sighed. Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you. Do I ever pay you back in kind? He smiled. You already do. You mean today? Sure. Lisa waved her hand. It's nothing. Not to me it isn't. I'm just glad I could help you. I'm offering you a position in our firm. Lisa raised her eyebrows. You'll be in charge of promoting our milk and everything else. What are we gonna have? I don't know how to. I don't have a degree. Yes, you do. Did you do something today? Something I would never have thought of with my education. Lisa smiled. Well, to be fair, it was your dad who came up with it. It will be cool to have your products consumed by all the people in the surrounding villages. It was an idea, and you started it. Okay, let's just say that everyone's doing a good job. You know, I'm always happy to help you for free. He used his head. We'll come back to this conversation. As Thomas promised, he drove Lisa to every credit, every exam, and walked Nick, while the baby's mom passed. Well, asked Thomas, every time she left the university, did Lisa take the test or did she pass? Congratulations. Lisa would laugh and Thomas would add, turning to the baby. Our mommy's smartest Lisa was indignant every time. She realized that from the outside they looked like a happy family, and she sometimes caught herself thinking that she wished they really were. But each time she kept repeating the same phrase to herself, and each time it hurt more when she said it. But it's better to let it be than to give herself false hopes. Thomas is a wonderful man, the best man in the world, but she, Lisa, is no match for him. She's just a stupid, uneducated girl with a baby in her arms. Why would he want her? After a while, he got her to take a job with him. She was mainly engaged in promotion of products, farms in her native area, and worked with the locals who got a job here, as it was supposed to be. Those didn't immediately realize that John wasn't to be trifled with. He did not forgive drunkenness, absenteeism, tardiness, and theft. For this reason, more than half of the hired workers were fired in the first month. But those who stayed learned their lesson. The pay was high. The working conditions were luxurious, and all the villagers were eager to get a job on a farm or a sap. But it was Lisa who put in a good word for us, the laid-offs. We'll be punks, honestly. I'll talk, but I won't promise anything, Lisa said. She talked to John. What do you think? Should we give them a second chance? He asked gawkily, looking at Lisa. She shrugged her shoulders. It's up to you. Handed him a list of those who were eager for a second chance, said John. I don't even know, let me see. Suddenly, Wendy intervened in the conversation. She quietly came up behind him and gently put her palm on the man's shoulder. He cautiously covered her hand with his fingers. Sure, honey, look. Wendy ran her eyes over the list. James can be brought back, she said. He's a man smart and sleight of hand, and he won't miss out on his profits. Why was he fired? Tried to steal government property, John said. Wendy nodded. If he realizes that it's more profitable to work honestly, he'll never steal anything again. He worked at a sawmill in the neighborhood until it went bankrupt. The conditions are better here, and you won't have to spend so much time traveling. All right, said John. What do you think of Betty? Wendy sighed. She's a good cook, but she'll always be late. Never wakes up before 12 o'clock. I thought everyone in the village was early. That's a misconception. I'll be aware of that. The production is increasing, Wendy added. She could be put on the second shift. All right, we'll keep that in mind. What about these two? Fired for drinking. Wendy shook her lips. I can't say anything good about them. There's no way to stop them from drinking. The only thing I can say is they can stay sober for a while. So if you've got a simple full-time job, you could try them there. 1 week on, 1 week off. Okay, I'll think about it. Lisa looked at them with a smile. How had her mother transformed herself after she had allowed herself to admit that John liked her? She had been afraid to tell Lisa. The daughter had to start the conversation herself. Wendy ended up crying and said she was afraid of her mom's judgment of her. Come on, Lisa said, you have no idea how happy I am for you. I'm scared, daughter, quietly said Wendy. After all these years, her mother reproachfully told her, Lisa, didn't you teach me that you should think about your own happiness if you think it's possible? Maybe it's worth taking the risk. Wendy looked at her daughter and smiled. When did you have time to grow up and become so wise? Lisa smiled back. Perhaps it's because I was raised by two of the most wonderful, wisest women in the world. Another thing Wendy was afraid of was Anna's judgment. After she began her relationship with John, she came to talk to her mother-in-law about it. She calmly listened to her and said, John, I have long loved you as my own daughter. I liked you the first day Sebastian brought you to meet you. While you were married, I couldn't be happy for my son. It seemed unreal to me that he could have met such an amazing girl. Honestly, at first I kept looking for a catch in you. I thought you couldn't possibly be such an amazing man. And then I fell in love with you. And then I was born a lesbian. And there was no happier person in the world than me. Anna paused, took out a handkerchief, waved it at the running tears. Then gently took her sister-in-law's hand when Sebastian died. At first I thought my life was over too, but I had your tears. I forced myself to live, to take care of you. And as the years went by, I grew to love you even more. You became my daughter, and now I can't imagine my life without you. And of course, I want you both to be happy. I see what you've become lately. And what's that? Wendy asked, embarrassed. Your mother-in-law smiled, as if you had woken up after years of sleep like a flower that had been lying frozen for a long time. And now the years have melted, the ground has thawed, and the flower has bloomed again. That's a beautiful comparison. Well, that's how I see it. And I'd like to see my daughter like that forever. Tears sprang from Wendy's eyes too. The women embraced. Little Nick grew up. And toward the middle of the summer came the day when Lisa decided for the first time to leave him with his mother for a long time. She herself had to go to the city, sign the documents at the university, confirming that she had successfully transferred to the second year, and take literature for independent study. Lisa also wanted to visit her dorm room, to pick up some things. Thomas, who also had his own things to do in the city, drove her there. "I'll probably be later than you," he said guiltily. "That's all right. I'll find something to do," Lisa smiled. "Wait for me in the dormitory." Lisa quickly finished her business and decided to visit the dean of the faculty. She had some free time. "Oh, Matviva, hello," Lisa said shyly. "Do you remember me?" Jenna smiled. How could she? Such students should be remembered. "I've been looking at your transcripts. Congratulations on a successful session." "Thank you." Chuckles. "You take your time." Lisa shrugged. "I don't think so." "Then have tea with me. It would be my pleasure." The dean stood up and turned on a clear electric kettle, peppermint tea. "You like it?" "Yeah, that's great, because I love it too." Jenna placed a cup in front of Lisa, hot flavored tea, and a vase of candy. "Who is your son, Nick? Congratulations from the bottom of my heart." "Thank you so much. How are you coping?" "I'm doing fine." The woman looked at her carefully. "That's how you answer everything. But feel free to be honest. If it's within my power, I'll try to help." Lisa gave her a warm smile. "Thank you for being so helpful. But I'm really doing well. My mom and grandmother are helping me, and I have a close friend who won't leave me either." A sly twinkle flickered in the dean's eye. "Just a friend." Lisa felt herself blush. It was only the second time she had interacted with Jenna, but whether it was the local tea, or the kind tone of her conversation partner, or the fact that she was tired of keeping it all to herself, she wanted to be frank. "Well, I'm just a friend to him, and he's more than that to me. Only he doesn't realize it." Jenna raised her eyebrows, drank from her cup, and set it carefully on the saucer. "Pardon my curiosity, but what does he do for you in terms of just friendship?" she asked. Lisa shrugged. "Gives me a job. Helps with the baby. Always willing to help. Drove me here from the village for all my credits and exams. I know I can ask him anything, and he won't say no." The dean smiled slyly. "It seems that what you're describing goes far beyond simple friendship," she remarked. Lisa blushed, lowered her head, and shook her head desperately. "No, he says so himself." "Have you ever shown him how much he means to you?" "No, have you?" "Where is he?" "Where am I?" Jenna furrowed her brow. "What's that supposed to mean?" Lisa bit her lip. She was already regretting having started this conversation. But it was too late to back out. He is handsome, rich, successful, very smart, and kind, and from a completely different social group. "Why would he want someone like me?" "Like what?" asked Jenna. "A young, beautiful, intelligent, wonderful girl." Lisa sighed a first-grade absentee from the village with a baby in her arms. The dean rolled her eyes. "Oh, what kind of a child are you yourself, Lisa?" "A man would never spend that much energy and time on a girl who only has friendly feelings. I'm sure he's secretly in love with you. Except that he's afraid to make the first move, because you keep him at a distance." Lisa blushed. "I'm not sure that's possible." The dean smiled. "That's the wrong thing to say. You need to have more faith in your own abilities. I see your great potential, and I'm probably not the first. Who's telling you that? Please don't let yourself think you're inferior or unworthy." Jenna Lisa didn't leave Jenna Lisa's office until an hour later. They talked about a lot of things. After that, the girl, as planned, went to the dormitory. Her roommates had already left for their hometowns, and the room was quiet, empty, and dusty. Lisa went through her things, took a couple notebooks with notes, looked at her watch. There was still plenty of time left. She found among her things a book she had bought a long time ago, but had forgotten about it. She immersed herself in reading. The book was already finished, and there was still more than an hour to go before the meeting with Thomas. Lisa opened a map on her phone and saw that it would take about 40 minutes to walk from her dormitory to his office. And there was a park on the way. She texted Thomas and told him to take a walk. She'd be at his office at the appointed time. She wanted to call him instead, but decided she didn't want to distract him. She checked that everything was in order in the room and went out, remembering to lock the door. Thomas was immersed in his work with his head. He tried not to be distracted by outside stimuli. He wanted to finish his work early, so he could pick up Lisa as soon as possible. Maybe they could even stop for a bite to eat. Strange, they hadn't seen each other for a few hours and he already missed her. Maybe they could try to talk tonight. Tell her he can't take it anymore. That maybe she'd give him a chance. I'm scared. What if she says no? What if she's embarrassed to say no? At least they have this friendship between them now. He can see her every day, talk to her about everything. She laughs at his jokes, cooks meals with him. When he comes to visit, she trusts him completely. Suddenly, after his vacation, he will be deprived of that. Finally, the work was finished. He glanced at his watch. It was getting late. Lisa must have faltered by now. He picked up his phone to call her, apologize, and tell her he was on his way. The screen glowed with unread messages from Lisa. Thomas opened it and went cold. Hi. I'm bored sitting in my room. I thought I'd walk to your office. There's a park on the way. I'll walk there for a while, but I'll be waiting for you on the bench outside the office by the time you say. Kisses Lisa. The park she was about to walk through didn't have the best reputation. It wasn't exactly a park. It was more like an abandoned forest in the middle of the city. The trees hadn't been trimmed in years. The paths hadn't been cleared even on a sunny day. It was dark, and many alcoholics, drug addicts, and other dubious personalities chose this park as a place for their gatherings. It was certainly no place for a young, attractive girl. Thomas rushed out of the office like a scalded man. Without waiting for the elevator, he ran down the stairs, nearly slipping on the steps they had just taken. Leaped past the astonished security guard into the street. The bench where Lisa was supposed to be sitting stood empty. He ran to the car, taking the route she was supposed to take. He looked carefully at the rare passersby, trying to find a small female figure with a mop of red hair, but there was no one like Lisa here. Thomas cursed himself with the last words, why he had missed her messages, why he had not foreseen that she would get bored and walk. He was supposed to keep her safe from all the bad things in this world. If anything happened to Lisa now, he would never forgive himself. Finally, Thomas reached the park, jumped out of the car, and ran towards it. There were a bunch of teenagers, dog owners with their happy pets. Slightly staggered, studious, untidily dressed men, Thomas ran all the way through the park. Lisa was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, he realized it was okay to call her. It was strange why such a simple thought had not occurred to him before. Probably it was all the fear for her that had completely shut off his brain. He dialed her number with trembling hands. There were long beeps. Thomas listened. Somewhere not too far away from him, behind the bushes, a gentle ringing melody was echoing. That was it. It was her phone. Like a wild animal, he rushed to the sound, ready to fight the dozens of hooligans surrounding her. Lisa scrambled around in her bag, trying to retrieve what had fallen to the very bottom. Phone nearly screamed in fear when a tall black shadow jumped out at her from somewhere behind the bushes. Are you trembling? She asked, recognizing her friend, Lisa. He exhaled hoarsely, grabbing her hands. Thomas' face was a pale bandage streaming lines of sweat. His chest and the back of his shirt were wet too, as if he'd been running away from someone. The boy was breathing hard, but there was relief on his face. What's wrong? Careful, Lisa asked. He breathed often and deeply, gradually calming down. I was so scared for you, Thomas said at last. I thought something had happened to you. Only now Lisa realized that it must have been a long time ago. Oops, guilty, she said. I'm sorry. I was supposed to wait for you outside the office, and it's so nice here. I was out and about, and I forgot about the time. Then I saw the squirrels and went to look at them. Okay, suddenly he looked at her strangely. Yes, Lisa confirmed, perplexed. He grinned and suddenly drew her to him, hugged her tightly. Did you scare me to death? She felt nice and warm in his arms. She didn't want to go anywhere. Why were you scared? She asked. Thomas sighed, as if he had to explain something too obvious. Are you still asking? He muttered. A young, beautiful girl, alone in the park in the evening. I'm not alone. The place is full of people. Thomas rolled his eyes and sighed, I don't have the energy to argue with you. Come on, let's go. They walked along the paths of the park toward the car. Each of them had a lot of questions on their minds, but neither of them dared to start a conversation. How are you doing at the university? Thomas asked, when they drove home, to break the silence. Good, Lisa replied. I have been successfully accepted into the second year. Congratulations. Thank you. Silence again. Thomas suddenly heard her breathing noisily and heavily. He glanced over and saw that her cheeks were flushed. You're all right. Very softly, he asked. But Lisa hesitated. She waited a few seconds and in a strange voice said, Imagine, Jenna, my dean of the faculty, told me an amazing thing today. Thomas didn't understand anything, but just in case he nodded and clarified what we were talking about. It was unexpected. Oh, wow, yeah, Lisa sighed noisily again. I said I have a wonderful friend who does everything for me. Thomas hooked his fingers into the steering wheel so that his knuckles popped. Yeah, kind of dry, he confirmed. Do you have a friend like that? Lisa, not taking her gaze off his hands, continued Jenna. She told me it doesn't work that way, that a friend just wouldn't do that much. He pressed his lips together. Well, it's now or never in as calm a voice as possible, he said. I think your dean is a very smart woman. Lisa blushed. It even seemed to him that it got hotter in the car. But the girl said nothing, and he continued. You are more than a friend to me. I have loved you, Lisa, for a long time. Lisa lowered her eyes and said quietly, Why didn't you ever tell me that before? He shrugged his shoulders. How, if you keep saying that I'm just a friend to you, I didn't want to impose my love on you. She coughed, unconvinced, and said, I thought you were the one who keeps saying I'm just a friend to you. He froze, digesting what he'd heard in his head, then turned the wheel sharply to the side, and the car came to a stop on the side of the road. Thomas looked her straight in the face, as if trying to read her thoughts. What does that mean, Lisa? She took a deep breath, squeezed her eyes shut, then made up her mind. She opened her eyes and looked at him. You're more than a friend to me, too. I love you, Lisa. His heart pounded frantically. Thomas laughed. How stupid are you and I? Before Lisa knew it, he had already wrapped his hands around her face and kissed her passionately and tenderly. It was decided to have the wedding at the end of August. The days were very warm then. We have good young people, Anna said. The nomadic great-grandson's hands were not harmful. Usually at this time, and the first frosts will already hit. And in the daytime it rains or winds, and here it's warm as in the middle of summer. Yes, Wendy said with a smile. They're good. When did you and John get married? Slyly asked her mother-in-law. Wendy blushed. What's the hurry? They are the young ones, but slyly said Anna. We have everything ready, asked Wendy. Moving on to the current topic, the women must have raised their heads because they heard the door creak open. John walked into the yard. So my good ones. He turned to Anna and Wendy. We're all set. No guests yet. Oh, like they have a long drive. I don't like it when they're late. I know, sweetheart, but it's still half an hour away. The reception was right in the village. The registrar said it was her most unusual wedding ever. They organized the celebration in a large open meadow, which was right on the edge of the village. There they put tables, chairs, and a huge wicker arch decorated with wildflowers. Lisa was dressed in a light, woven lace dress. Her hair was loose and only slightly up. You don't need much color either, said Cindy, who was the hairdresser and makeup artist for the day. A little emphasize your big eyes and eyelashes, and it will be perfect. Lisa smiled. I am so glad to have you with me on this day. Her friend's eyes rounded in surprise. How could I not be? You're my best friend. You're mine too. Really? Cindy smiled slyly. And I thought you'd consider Thomas a friend to the last. Lisa laughed. Oh, come on. I'm not going to stop teasing you with this. He's good too, though. Okay, this is as good as it gets. Better, yes. Cindy finished her makeup, stood up and admired her creation. Are you perfect? Lisa looked in the mirror. You're a magician, Cindy. It's not hard to be when the sun is so beautiful. The marriage ceremony was a success. The villagers froze as they listened to the registrar's sonorous, deep voice speaking of love and family. I agree, Lisa replied. At the questions directed to her, looked at her former best friend and now husband. Agreed, said Thomas. I now pronounce you husband and wife, solemnly said the registrar, and added more softly, you may kiss each other. Some of the guests shouted bitterly and bitterly from all sides. Of course they kissed. After a few minutes, everyone went to the table. The traditional village wedding began, the loaf was broken, songs were sung, toasts were made. I was afraid when I imagined how it would go quietly, Lisa said in her husband's ear. Why? He asked in surprise. Don't you know what? I don't. Sorry, I don't have much experience with rustic weddings, so it's hard to guess. I was expecting something. Lisa sighed, fighting. The husband laughed. How could I not have guessed, of course? But so far, everything seems to be going well. I hope so. Well, if anything, we've got a couple of employees here who have shifts tomorrow. So they're not drinking tonight, so they'll help out in case there's a problem. Oh, right, I forgot. Lisa smiled. Did you and your father manage to break the village system? Not us, but the strict rules and decent working conditions. They talked as easily and calmly as they always seemed to. Nothing had changed in their lives since their marriage. They could talk to each other just as easily and casually, perhaps because they were so infatuated with each other. That's why they didn't notice the atmosphere had changed. Look who's coming. One of the guests exclaimed in a loud whisper. A stream ran by. The guests began to look closer. After a while, Lisa and Thomas realized that something was going on. A man was walking towards their clearing. It was a man in a military uniform. Judging by his staggered, studied gait, he was drunk. His face was red and his hands were clenched into fists. You shouted loudly, he shouted, pointing his finger at Lisa. She froze. At first second, she didn't realize who this man was. But when she saw his fierce gaze, it gradually dawned on her. Ethan asked her in surprise, and stood up. She didn't wait. Ethan was shaking. He seemed ready to pounce on her. How could you? It's only been a year and you're already married. And you swore to me you loved me. Bitch. Thomas stood up and walked away. He said in a calm voice, looking Ethan straight in the eye. The man hummed and looked at him. You're the groom then, the husband. Ethan nodded. Even so. I know about you, rich boy. I didn't deny it, Thomas. So you sold out for money. Ethan turned to Lisa. She could feel the bitterness in her mouth now. Did she really ever really love him? Apologized to her. Also calmly said Ethan that one. People are kind. Look at this. He turned to all the guests. Everyone looked at it differently. Some with fear, some with curiosity. John sat tense, ready to stand up for his son at any moment. He was held back only by Wendy, who gently placed her palm on his boss. Don't worry, in a whisper, one of the workers told him. We won't let him ruin the wedding. If he throws into a fight immediately on the ground, hit us with a twist. Vasily felt a little calmer, and Ethan continued. Gone. So you were only in the army for a year. I thought my faithful girl would wait for me, but there she was. Not even a few months later, and she's already having an affair with someone else. The guests started to murmur. Thomas wanted to leave the table, but Lisa gently took his hand. It's all true, she said calmly. Ethan hadn't expected this and was silent for a few seconds. She continued, I was in love with you. That summer I thought we were serious. We were, Ethan shouted. But there was less confidence in his voice. Lisa nodded contentedly and continued. And then I found out that I wasn't your only girlfriend. The women at the table gasped, and then I heard one of them whisper loudly, yes. Everyone said he was a womanizer. Lisa smiled. I also know you have a woman, the two children at the tables murmured. Ethan didn't seem to know where to take his eyes. He clearly hadn't expected Lisa to know that. I wrote you a letter, asking you to explain yourself, but you didn't answer me. After that, you dared to come to my wedding and make claims. She stopped talking. There was silence. Everyone looked at Ethan. He looked around fearfully, apparently expecting some kind of support. But everyone around him was looking at him with disapproval. You should get out of here, one of the guests said contemptuously. What the hell are you up to? A woman shouted indignantly. You're not worth her little finger. Shouted a third person. Get out of here. Take your wife and children to the village, and don't forget to visit your other women. Voices rumbled from all sides. The guests stood up ready with determination, but to protect the bride and to escort out the guest who hadn't been abandoned. Oh, come on, shouted Ethan, and ran off in the direction of the village. A few men followed him. John looked at the laborer who was calming him down. They're not going to hit him. He smiled. What's the matter with you? Just a little? Seeing the stern look of the supervisor, he sighed and stood up. All right, I'll go and see that they don't overdo it. Come on, kid, sig daddy. Lissa said affectionately. Her son raised his head at her and looked at her with shiny round eyes. Pausing, Lissa repeated. Thomas grinned. He was sitting at the opposite end of the long, fluffy rug, with the baby sitting in the center of it. Call him out, demanded Lisa. Thomas smiled at his son. Come to me, he said and waved his arms. The baby looked at him interestedly, thought for a moment, and then crawled toward him. Wow, Lissa gasped. Thomas laughed. Wait, you'll see something else. The child crawled briskly to his father, who was sitting on the carpet, and placed his small hands on his knees. He didn't do that when I was there, Lissa said quietly, afraid of scaring him off. In the meantime, the son had already climbed up and finally stood on his feet. Thomas, of course, helped him by supporting him with his arms. But still the little one stood on his feet almost on his own. That's what we learned while you were practicing, Thomas said. We wanted to surprise you, and you did. She got up, walked over to her husband and son, and sat down next to them, then hugged them both. The son was pretty stoked. He smiled. Okay, Mommy, let's go to Grandma and Grandpa's. Yes, said Lisa, as if waking up. We have to help them set the table. They came out of the house. Thomas was holding his son in his arms. It wasn't far to the neighbors. Oh, here we are at last. Where's my youngest great-grandson? It was Grandma Anna's voice. She appeared in the doorway and took little Grisha from his father's arms. And where is my eldest? Asked Thomas. Yes, here I am, Dad. Towards them jumped out a boy of about 5 years old. My grandfather and I were playing chess, he reported cheerfully. Thomas patted Nick on the head. Wow, and I only started playing chess with him when I was 12. What's the use? John's voice came from the back of the house. You still don't know how. But my grandson has obvious talent. Lissa smiled and gave her husband's hand a reassuring squeeze. Boys, stop fighting harshly, said Wendy, appearing in the doorway. She had a hand on her large belly and seeing it, Lisa smiled again. Come on, Mom, I'll help you. The women walked into the kitchen. How are you feeling? Lisa asked. Wendy shrugged her shoulders. I'm fine. Of course, it was easier with you. What's wrong? Concerned? Asked the daughter. Wendy laughed. No, don't be worried. The pregnancy is going well. Of course, it's a lot easier at 20 than when you're in your 40s. You're doing great, Lisa said and kissed her on the cheek. Wendy is born, by the way, said Anna, coming into the kitchen. You and John went to town today. What did they say at the ultrasound? Wendy smiled at the girl. Well, finally. Chorus exclaimed mother-in-law and daughter. Or else you'll go crazy with these boys. Added already twice great-grandmother Anya. Wendy laughed. John also said that he was counting on a girl. And you yourself? She shrugged her shoulders. I'd be happy either way. But it would probably be easier with a daughter. All right, Anna said. So far, all 4 boys have found something to occupy themselves with. Let's cook. Yes, said Lisa. It's 8 o'clock. Then the women concentrated for a while on washing and cutting vegetables, shaping the turkey, arranging the fruit in a large vase, chilling the champagne, and other pre-New Year's chores. Wendy was the first to break the silence. Do you remember, she said, how we welcomed all our New Year's just a few years ago? Anna smiled. Of course we do. Always the 3 of us in your little house. Lissa joined in the reminiscing. Grandmother always baked honey cake, also pies with cabbage and potatoes. She'd come over in the evening. My mom and I were already chopping salads, stuffing chicken, boiling potatoes. You always helped us. Then by 12 we sat at the table, congratulated each other, exchanged gifts, then went out and watched the fireworks that the neighbors launched. We come home and change the channels. We find a good movie and watch it until the wee hours of the morning. Grandma used to stay with us until morning, Lisa said. I loved it so much. On January 1, we would get up late and have tea with grandmas and cakes and cake. 3 generations of women looked at each other with a smile. The kitchen was warm and cozy. I couldn't have thought then that in a few years our family would be so big, Wendy said. Anna smiled. I am very happy for you, my favorite girls. And now that I have 2 great-grandchildren and another granddaughter will be born in a few months, I just enjoy every day. I'm very happy too, Lisa said. The meal was ready in an hour, but ready to go. Peeked into the kitchen. Thomas is almost there. Lisa turned to him. We're starving, her husband informed her. He's going to swallow it, Grandma sighed. Come on, help. I'm ready. Me too. Nick appeared at the door. The whole bunch of them began carrying plates of food into the living room, where the fireplace was already stoked. There was a decorated Christmas tree and a table covered with a white or Nina tablecloth. However, the table was vacated only by John because he was holding his youngest grandson in his arms. Finally, everyone sat down at the table. The men loudly paid tribute to the delicious food and praised the women. John was the first to stand up. I would like to make the first toast. I am grateful to this year for everything that has happened. In general, I have no reason to complain about life. He looked around at everyone present and smiled. I have a wonderful son, a wonderful daughter-in-law, and 2 beloved grandchildren. And of course, the most beloved woman in the world, with whom we will soon have a daughter. And of course, Anna, who is the best mother-in-law in the world. Anna smiled. This year has brought me a lot of happiness, as well as all the previous ones. And I hope to have even more beautiful, bright days in the future. Hooray! Thomas shouted. Hooray! Caught up with the rest of the table, they continued to sit, drink, eat, congratulate each other. Closer to 12, John got up. Where are you going, grandfather? Nick asked in surprise. John stretched and yawned old. I started to sleep. Shall I go? Shouted the eldest grandson. Santa Claus is coming soon. You'll miss everything. Grandfather sadly spread his hands. Well, what can I do? Tell me about him in the morning. Okay, sighed Nick. Go to sleep. Grandfather nodded and went to his room. Grisha seems to be falling asleep already too, said Lisa. I'll go, leaving him. She quietly left the room. And when Santa Claus is already coming? Asked Nick. Grandma seriously looked at the clock 15 minutes later. The grandson suddenly squinted slyly. How do you know that? Anna was not the least bit embarrassed. He comes to us every year. We have an agreement, and I do not remember. Last year, you were already asleep then, Thomas explained. Okay. Nick pressed his lips together and asked another question. How does Santa Claus fly around in one night? Magic. Anna also answered confidently. Just at that moment, there was a knock on the door. It was he who shouted to Nick, Come look. The boy rushed to the door, and the adults, smiling, moved after him. Lisa came out of the room, putting Grisha down, and joined the others. Well, hello, Nick. A man's bass sounded from the hallway. You waited for me? Yes, happily replied the boy. That's good. Santa Claus. Shook from the snow, patted his mittens, and sat down on a chair in the hallway. So tell me, how have you been this year? Good. Nick answered confidently. I go to the kindergarten preparatory group. I also help my dad and grandpa on the farm. I also help my mom with my little brother. My grandmother taught me to read, and my great-grandmother and I bake pies together. Santa Claus smiled affectionately. And that's good. I can see that you are a good boy. Here's a present for you for that. He pulled a big box out of a huge red sack. Thank you, Santa Claus. Then the child thought for a moment and added, why don't you stay and have tea with us? Because you must be tired. I'd be glad to. Nick, I can't. Grandpa has a lot of things to do. Goodbye. Soon after the wizard left the table, John returned. I've had a good night's sleep, he announced cheerfully, and it's time to exchange gifts. The eldest grandson looked at him suspiciously, but said nothing. Santa Claus already gave me a present, he announced. You can take it from here. Lisa sat on her husband's lap and hugged his neck with a smile, looking at this picture. Your father really is a wizard, isn't he? She said thoughtfully. Thomas raised his eyebrows. Why is that? If he hadn't thought of moving to our village then, none of this would have happened. Thomas nuzzled his nose into her shoulder and kissed her neck. Are you right? I hadn't thought of that before. Although I think there is such a thing as fate. Even if it wasn't, I'd still meet you someday. For example, years later Lisa grinned when I would be married to Ethan. Her husband frowned and wrapped his arms around her tighter. Not even mentioning that rascal. Just thinking about him makes me want to go to the next village and punch him in the face. Lisa said quietly, surprised by her husband's combative attitude. There is no need to go anywhere, especially on New Year's Eve. Okay, he quickly agreed then tomorrow. Even though Lisa knew he was joking, she didn't want to check it out. He'd moved a long time ago, I think, up north somewhere. Thomas raised his eyebrows. How did you know that? Wendy told me. Good. He hesitated a moment, but asked. He knows about Nick. Lisa sighed. Probably guesses it's the village after all. There are always rumors, but either he's not interested or he thinks you're the father. Her husband made her comfortable, wrapped his arms around her. I am Nicky's father, he said firmly, and I'm not giving him to anyone. Lisa felt that tears were about to come to her eyes and hit her face in the top of his head. Dad, a boy's voice came out. How does Santa Claus know I wanted a spaceship? He shipped the box with the construction kit. I only told you about it. Thomas shrugged. Well, I guess it's because he's a wizard. The son squinted suspiciously, okay, and scurried off to collect a new toy. He's getting too smart. He's growing up, said Thomas Lisa. Yeah, he'll figure it out next year. John and Wendy came up to them. But you were sure until you were 12 that Santa Claus was real, said John. But my grandson will be smarter. Oh, Dad, I'm not exaggerating until 11. Lisa guessed at 5, said Wendy with a smile. Of course, said Lisa. Because Santa Claus had Grandma's eyes and hands. Anna smiled. I don't think it matters so much to what age children believe in miracles. The main thing is to have loved ones around to give them those miracles. You're right as always, Wendy said. I didn't believe in miracles anymore, but John gave them to me. She looked at her husband, who shook his head. You were my miracle. He put his hand on her stomach. Let's have tea. Anna suggested. If it's with your cake, I will.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Adriana's parents were overjoyed when she was born. The cute, blonde-haired girl with blue eyes looked up at her mother and smiled. Hi, the woman held her in her strong arms. What are you doing with her? You've got work to do, yelled to the woman by her mother, who wouldn't let her rest for a minute. So, what did you just give birth to? No one will feed the cattle. Lie down for a while, and I'll be there soon, said the new mother to her baby girl. She laid her in a makeshift crib that was made from an old stroller. Adriana's father was also a hard worker. He wasn't at home at all, always out and about. I can't. Tiredly, Betty perked up on the stool that stood in the kitchen. It's okay. She's got a little helper. She'll grow up soon. She'll help you, the woman said, pointing at the still uncomprehending Adriana. Yes, another person who was born not to live but to suffer, Betty sighed. They lived in the village. Since childhood, the girl had only seen dirty manger from which the animals ate. Every day she had to get up before the sun came up, milk a cow, and then another, then take them out to the field. When you came back, clean up the pigs, feed the rabbits and the goats and all the others. And if, God forbid, someone's mother doesn't count in the evening, it's a headache. That's how Betty grew up. Betty, marry me. One day a young guy named Sam drove up to the house on a tractor. Aha, what a ransom you've got on that tractor. She laughed. I'll find the ransom. What do you want? He said it back. The piglet was met by Betty's mother. Oh, it's a piece of cake. The boy laughed. So spit. Then you'll have a girl. The woman wouldn't let go of him. Are you going to give me to my mother for a piglet? I won't hurt anymore, Betty asked. Tears came to her eyes. But are you going to go or what? The young man waited for her answer. Let's go. The young girl waved her hand then. For some reason at that moment, she thought that a man would appear in the house would become easier. But it was only in her head. It didn't get easier. It seemed to be the opposite. It only became more troublesome. Do you need this wedding? Grumbled her mother then. How many things to prepare and do. Why should I be left without a party? Betty was teaching horses then. I'll see you tomorrow. After that feast, the woman knew that even if there was a war, the animals would have to be fed. Why didn't I ever get up after the feast? I couldn't sleep at all. And at first light, I'm already there. The cow is in shock. The girl resented her mother constantly because she did not appreciate and did not love her. That's how family life began. She cooks in the morning knee-deep in manure, and in the evening again with the cattle. And in summer, she never got out of the vegetable garden. First she plants, then she starts to plunge and weed, and then it's time to dig. Any intimacy with her husband was out of the question. When it was time to sleep, she just fell on the bed and fell asleep. Betty, when my granddaughter will give birth to me, her mother asked. When the time is right, then I will give birth. You don't give me a break. All work. Yes, work. When will you have grandchildren? She said to the woman. Of course, it's your mother's fault again. You have a job. Your mother is wrong. You have no children. And again she was nagging. But the woman, all right, Mom, don't be offended. No offense. I'm just tired. She hugged me hard. Betty mother. And here's the pregnancy thinking that at this point, everyone would get off her back and she could get some rest. But no, it didn't work out again. Even with all the chores done. Feet feeling stiff, tummy tingling. No, it's one thing. Get up. Work. What are you doing out there? Shouted her mother from the street, where she had swept the yard. I can't. It's hard. Almost made Betty cry. We in the field objected get up and work. The woman couldn't let her do anything and the others around her just lay there. Now the girl was getting up. The labor started at night. Betty asked for a doctor to be called, but the mother said she could handle everything herself. Now the daughter was lying down and looking around. She didn't know what lay ahead of her. Betty looked at her little girl. She wished her happiness and nothing else. Betty, why are you sitting there? I think it's your mother who's dead. Sam came into the house. Don't you get it? Wife, go to the hen house and look for your mother-in-law. He gestured. Betty was scared. What if her husband was telling the truth? She opened the coop door. Mom was lying in some strange position. The woman was either kneeling or bent over, but her head was on the ground. Mom touched her Betty, and she just fell to the side. Sam. The woman called out then. Tears sprang from her eyes. She's dead. The husband came running. Together, they carried the woman to another place. They had to prepare everything for the funeral. The neighbors, of course, helped. No one passed by in such distress. Everyone gathered, gave Betty advice on how and what was best to do. At the cemetery, everyone stood for a long time. The whole village knew the woman as a good and working woman. No one had ever said a bad word about her in her life. Thank you. She thanked her neighbors and Betty's mother's friends. What are we going to die for? You're coming to help too, aren't you? You are. Sure. How could I not? Betty cried again, even though she'd thought different things about her mother when she was alive. But now that she was gone, she realized what a valuable person she was in her destiny. What will we do without her? I read Betty. Did your husband ever nag you? He's tired of his wife moaning. I have to take care of the cattle and the garden. I can't do it alone. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just talking. What do you need me for? Husband frowned. I didn't believe in him. The wife didn't believe in him at all. I've never once seen you get up and go milk a cow. She said, examples. Here's another cow I'm taking to the pigsty. Oh, let me feed it. The husband was indignant. He realized he was wrong. Let's sell everything and buy an apartment in the city. Suddenly, the wife calmed down. She looked at him with big eyes. Why are you so full of hogwash? What city? What are we going to do there? He twisted his finger at his temple. Are we going to get a job there? Betty was dreaming with no education and no experience. You'll be a Belarusian there. Wait and be happy. He said it all backwards. Sam. He couldn't sit with his wife anymore. Said he went to work and left the house. Finally, no one's harassing me. I can lie down for a while, she said to Adriana. And she was lying there, looking at her mom, and still didn't understand anything. I'll never be like your grandmother. If you want to do something, please, it's your life, your choice, Betty told her daughter, but she wasn't allowed to lie down for long. The animals started reminding her in different voices that they were hungry too. Now Betty got up and reluctantly went to the yard, and there were heavy buckets, sacks, and other things again. Adriana grew up a bright girl. She learned early to read, write, and recite. There was no one to teach her. The kindergarten was on the other side of the village. At first her mother took her there, but then she realized that it was easier for a girl to stay at home, and in some cases she could already help. The little girl gave her mother a broom under the floor, and she herself went to work in the pigsty. Adriana thought it was a game. She did everything her mother asked her to do. My little one, you help with the dishes. Her mother would fill the basin with water. Adriana just splashed it around like that. She grew up running around with the other kids outside. You don't think about anything at that age. Adriana, come home. Betty realized she was turning into her mother, and she didn't want to be. She worked all day long. Her hands were like nothing else. They were as rough as a man's. Adriana, it's time to go to school. Daddy went to town, bought her some pens and pencils. The girl was so excited about it all. She couldn't wait to be at the desk. Studying wasn't easy. Some things the girl just didn't understand. There was no one to explain. The older boys and their parents went to the city. From there, they brought back different magazines. Adriana looked at the beautiful girls in the pictures and dreamed that her life would be exactly the same. She would grow up, go to the city to study, find a rich fiancé, and leave this village forever. And something spilled. Can't you help your mother sometimes? No, you can't. Feet to the ceiling. They don't want to do anything. Betty asked her when Adriana was in high school, Mom, leave me alone. I'm not gonna do anything. I used to help when I didn't realize it. Now I just don't want to. Her daughter answered her, What do you mean, I won't? Who will? You eat, you drink. Where do I get it all? There was a woman standing over her. I don't know. You can buy everything now. Go to the store. You can get eggs, meat, potatoes, curling her fingers. Enumerated and then waved away Adriana. Ah, I'll show you how to buy. You'll go to the vegetable garden now and feel it all. Her mother swung a towel at her. What are you doing? She jumped up from the couch. A girl. So they could run around the room for a while. Adriana didn't do well in school. She thought she'd finish school and then she'd see what she could do next. She kept looking at beautiful pictures, which she liked so much since childhood. The girl dreamed a lot, and she didn't know what she wanted to be. Just rich, happy, and perhaps to live far away from here. Adriana, let's go to the disco. The girls came in after her. Now she was finishing expanding. The girl, she was prominent blonde hair, big blue eyes, legs, as they say, from the years. Except she didn't have any outfits or jewelry. But she wasn't desperate. She did it all by herself on magazines, learned to sew, remade herself from the old things of her grandmother and mother, dresses, shirts. And today she wore a new outfit she'd just finished yesterday. And where do you get it all from? Her friends wondered. There is no more, she told them in response and laughed. Her mother only sighed, and she realized that she had been like that herself. Why don't we even have a computer at home? Adriana asked her mother, even smirking. We don't have a lot of things. We need money for everything. So we have to earn it. Adriana said smugly. You, like Betty, looked at your daughter with tired eyes. Why is that a problem? The girl wondered then. It isn't for you. The woman was amused. Wait, we have chickens, goats, cows, pigs. And that's all money. Curl your fingers. Adriana. Oh, really? Who needs it? Your milk? If everyone here has so much of it, it's a shame a mother can't even be understood by her own daughter. Let me go to the highway and sell it all every day, the girl suggested to her. The woman agreed well then. She herself once wanted to earn money like that, but it didn't work out. Now, while school was on vacation, Adriana got up with the rooster. She would pack a huge bag and ride her bike to the highway. There were lots of cars. They stopped, but almost all of them were asking for something ready to go. The girl realized that it was useless to stand here with meat. Milk and eggs were taken, but no meat. Mom, let's make some meat. Let's make some cheburek, and piroshki can be made of cabbage and potatoes, she suggested to the woman. Betty thought about it. Why do drivers who have gone somewhere far away need to buy raw meat or eggs when they just want a snack? And here stood a young girl with pies. Here you go, cheap and surly. I realized that my daughter was talking, so I agreed with her. Well, daughter, I didn't even think you had such an entrepreneurial spirit. You know how to do everything yourself. Do it. The woman let her. Betty was willing to help. Then what good is Adriana if all she does is sell? Any fool can do that. And you go for eggs, forget meat, mushrooms, potatoes, cabbage. Then you'll be in business for sure. The girl herself didn't realize how she got involved in all this. Adriana was getting up even earlier now. She had a lot to do. She has to bring in the dough, stuffing, cooking, and then wait for everything to take place and get ready. She'd arrive at the track with bags full of pies with different fillings. Everything was sold out in a matter of hours. I couldn't be happier. Thank you. It's delicious. She already had regular customers who often traveled here for work or just for business. The girl was interested in bookkeeping. She had to keep a tally. How much is minus? How much is plus? So she learned the basics from some old books from the library, and with the help of the cashier Bada Olai, she realized that the cost of her pies, especially with cabbage, potatoes, and eggs, was a penny. But the profit was tangible. Adriana began to save. She opened a special deposit in the bank, where she transferred all the money. She had almost no expenses, just flour, sugar, and salt. It wasn't much. Mom, this is your half. This is mine. She gave the woman the money. What a daughter. Why didn't you say something before? Betty realized that now money was starting to appear in their family. The woman wasn't going anywhere. She'd put it in a box so she could just get it out when she needed it. And you said you didn't have it, and you couldn't earn it. Adriana replied in a businesslike manner. She was flattered that she was still in school and already earning money for the house. Finally, her mom started to praise her. All quiet, study if you like. The woman left. She was really happy that her daughter was doing something. The girl was so much into her work that she had no time for anything else. The bookkeeping took her like a whirlwind. All those bills, kids, bad loans. Just keep up with the communications, the balance sheet. Now she didn't know what she wanted to do more. School was ahead of her. But Adriana didn't want to go back because she was already independent. Why teach her anything else? Have you forgotten that you have a ruler on your nose? Mom asked. They wanted to go to the city to buy some upgrades for September 1. But Adriana was busy, so Betty didn't bother her. No, arranging for a neighbor to drive to the track for me, Adriana replied. She was so reluctant to leave her lucrative business. Okay, I'll stay out of your business. Mom was leaving again. She didn't make her daughter do anything at all now, because she realized it was hard enough as it was. She gets up when it's still dark and starts fiddling with her dough. What can I say? Good for her, bringing money into the house. Betty will do it herself somehow. The neighbor's name was Sophia. She lived alone. She was in her 30s. I don't know what she did for a living, but she didn't work. That's why Adriana decided to go to her. She was ready to do everything herself, and all she wanted to do was take it to her and make it happen. Sophia, hi. Adriana came to her. She knew the girl, but now for some reason she was worried. Come in, she called her. That neighbor liked to have visitors, old or young. She was always alone, and this was some kind of entertainment. The girl came in. She told the neighbor she liked the idea, and according to Adriana's calculations, Sophia would make a decent income. She agreed. Adriana was generally happy when school started. She was up and about. Early in the morning, she would make the dough and take it to Sophia, and she would go to the track in the morning, and things were going well. Like today, Adriana came to her neighbor, and they counted together how much they had sold and what they had earned from it. That's great. There are a lot of customers who like different hotcakes. She put the proceeds on the table for her. The bills were of various denominations, but Adriana never missed a single one. 2 part gave Adriana's honestly earned Sophia money. She realized that if she didn't share, then nothing at all in life would work out. She came home, counted there was enough for a TV. But the girl dreamed of a computer or a laptop. She had already spent home. Internet was the only thing missing right now. She decided that she would go and buy one, and she wouldn't listen to anyone, and put the rest of the money in a deposit until later. What do you need it for? You'll go to school there and buy it. Betty was puzzled. She didn't understand anything about modern gadgets. What are you talking about? Young people have their whole life there today. The girl realized that her mother had never encountered such things. Well, I don't know. Betty just shrugged his shoulders. 11th grade was coming to an end. The income was decent. Adriana could afford more than just a laptop anymore. I'm going to the city this weekend, she told her parents. Good, you are already independent. Her mother agreed with her. I will buy myself a dress for graduation and a laptop, said Adriana, and dreamily. Your money, you buy what you want. Her mom didn't understand why she would spend money on an unnecessary item. Adriana waited for this day. She was not often in the city, and went there only once a year with her parents, and that was when she needed to buy something. The rest of the time she was in the village. But it all went. She kissed Betty and left the house, and life was very different in the city, even though it was small. Adriana went shopping, looking at the dresses there, the shoes. She liked everything so much. She realized that she couldn't buy it just because she had nowhere to wear it. Could you show me this dress? She asked the counselor. Yeah, now she was surprised. I mean, it was at the very end. They thought they wouldn't sell it to anyone. Oh, it's beautiful. In Adriana's eyes, it was bright, lush. What do you think? The girl seller looked at her very well. That's it. I'm taking it. She didn't even bother to look at the other dresses. Great choice. They'll probably give me a bonus for selling it. The consultant thought to herself. Thank you. A happy Adriana walked out of the store. After that, she went to the hardware store, where she spent a long time choosing something. But because she didn't understand anything, she couldn't make up her mind. Hello, my name is Michael. Can I help you? A young man approached her. Yes, I need a good laptop, she said. Let's see. He went down the aisles of technology. Okay, waiting, nodded Adriana. This is a great one. You can play and work on it. The young man held the box in his hands. Super, its price is good. The girl could not believe that he was holding in his hands what he had dreamed of for so long. Then let's go to the cash register. He showed her the direction. Adriana was happy. It was now possible to drive home in front of the store. She saw a cute cafe and decided to go in there. She walked in, took a seat, and placed her order. The prices here were not that expensive. The girl was just enjoying herself. Hi. She heard a man's voice behind her back, while the girl turned in her head, flashed 1,000 thoughts. Who could it be? And when she saw Michael, she smiled back. "What are you doing here?" Simply, she asked him. "I came to have lunch at home. I have no time, and it's far away." He sat down across from her. The consultant from the store was also not timid, although the girl did not let him. He still took a seat at her table. "Do you mind?" He suddenly came to his senses when he had already ordered. "Why are you laughing? It's more fun then." The girl did not think that so soon she would have new acquaintances in the city. "I'm Michael, you already know. What's your name?" He looked at the strange girl. "Adriana." She laughed again. "Nice to meet you. Did you come from somewhere?" he asked, because she looked a little different from the way city people dressed. Yes, she told him the name of the village, which to the young man was just an empty sound. "And now it makes sense," he smirked. "What do you understand?" She looked at him surprised. "That I've never seen you before." He found something to say. They sat and chatted. An hour went by without a second thought. "Well, I have to go to work." He got up from the table. "Come on, call and write." She waved him off. She and Michael exchanged phone numbers. After that, the girl went to the bus station. She had to get back. How was the trip? Her mother greeted her perfectly, and she put her shopping on the table. "Wow, daughter, how much did you save?" The woman wondered. What's the difference? She didn't want to talk about it. Adriana wanted to sit down at the table, turn on the new appliances, and try them out. When the girl did all that, it didn't work, so she dialed Michael's number. "Hey, listen, I can't figure this out." She started telling him about her problem. The guy explained everything. And now Adriana's online. "Thank you." She thanked him. "You're welcome." He disconnected. The girl was so sucked in. Was it that she couldn't finish until the morning, browsing different sites? "Adriana, what are you doing up?" The mother got up in the morning to take care of things. "Oh, Mom, wait." She waved it away. The girl saw that it was possible not to go constantly to the highway, and not to stand there, and just open a tent or a stall. She sat down and began to think. Then she remembered that in their center grandmothers sometimes sell seeds. They have iron trays. I wish she could get one of those. "Father, could you make me a sip-like in the center?" She asked her father. "It's easy. Only iron is needed," he said. "And where to get it?" Enterprising Adriana was ready for anything. "We could go to a doctor." "Does he take anything?" "Yes, he does," the man suggested. By lunchtime, Adriana was outside Jack's house. "Hi." She'd known the man for years. "What are you doing here?" He was surprised. Usually different men with iron came to him. "Mitya, help. I need iron to weld a tray like the one in the center." Adriana started asking him. She was making such a sad face. What a conversation. "Come in." He let her into the yard. There was a lot of stuff here. Adriana didn't understand much of it, and Jack couldn't tell her. He was just a receiver, not an expert. So the girl ran after her father. He immediately found 4 long sticks of iron. Then some other little things. Adriana didn't understand what would come of it, but the parents seemed to know everything. "Can I help you?" the daughter asked him. "How can you help me?" The man laughed. The girl saw that in his spare time he was pounding something with a sledgehammer and dumping with a machine. A week later in the vegetable garden stood such a tray, as if it was brought from the factory yesterday. "Now we will install it, and then we can insulate it," promised her father. "Cool." The girl was happy. The school graduation was over. Adriana wore the brightest and most beautiful dress. It was in the city. It was already out of fashion. But here in the village it was the most fashionable. Afterwards, many of the boys went to the river, others went somewhere else. But Adriana didn't have time for that. She came home, surfed the internet for a while, and then went to sleep for a couple of hours. Together with her father on the tractor, they brought the new equipment to the track, put it in a place that would not disturb the drivers. Now Adriana had her own spot where she could stand and sometimes even sit down. "We should buy a dough machine," she told her mother. "Do whatever you want. It's your business." The woman laughed. "Michael, hi." She called her friend in town. "Oh, how are you?" He was happy to hear from her. "Hey, do you guys sell dough machines?" she asked him. Sure." He was willing to help. "Can I ask you something?" she said sweetly. "Try." He didn't mind her requests. "Could you buy it and bring it over? You will come to me on the weekend, and I'll show you everything here. You'll have a rest," cried his girlfriend. "Great. It's been a long time since I went to the countryside." He was even happy. The girl was waiting for the weekend to come. Not only that she will get a new appliance, but also the guy will come, which, by the way, she liked. Saturday, she went to the station where she was supposed to meet Michael, and she told her mom that she had a guest coming. She was at home getting ready to meet him. Adriana waved hello when he was still on the bus. "But it's a long drive to you." He climbed out of the soulful cabin. "It's okay." She looked at the large box in the young man's hands. "Yes, checked everything. Everything works," he vouched for it. When the young men came home, Adriana immediately began to show and tell what they have here and how. Everything was so interesting. It was as if he was in the village for the first time. "You have not been on the street yet," the girl told him. They ate. Then Adriana took him to see the local sights. "Man, you are lucky to live in such a place." The boy admired the nature. "Yeah, all you city people want to go to the countryside, but you only spend a few days here. You know how hard life in the countryside is." It's like Adriana was complaining. "Can I come next weekend?" Michael asked her. "Why not?" She looked embarrassed. For the first time in their acquaintance, the couple walked around all day. And in the evening, tired, they returned home. "Did you like it?" Adriana asked him. "Very much." He was telling the truth. What was the best part? Adriana was curious about everything. "You." He took his eyes aside. "Are you kidding?" She blushed again. "No, why would I do that?" Michael was looking at Adriana now. "When did you realize it?" They were sitting in her room on the bed. "There in the city, when I first saw you, I thought you had fallen from the moon." He began to tell the girl the truth. "And then what changed?" "That wasn't very nice to hear." "I don't know. You're so open, so pure." He couldn't find the words. He was embarrassed. She wanted to get up, but the guy took her hand and pulled her to him. "Adriana." His face was so close she was trembling. "Can I kiss you?" Michael asked. "Try." She closed her eyes. It was the first kiss in a girl's life. It turned out to be very pleasant. She opened her eyes and looked at the young man. "Will you go out with me?" he asked. Yes, she wanted to nod, but didn't have time to do so. The boy's lips connected with hers again. "Children, come to the table," her mother shouted. Now Adriana felt like her face was on fire, and her mother was about to notice what they were doing here. "Let's go." Michael lifted her out of her seat. "Aha." She stood up, walked over to the mirror. Nothing about her appearance had changed. After dinner, the young people secluded themselves in the room again. "Are you sleepy?" Adriana asked Michael. "Not really," he said. "Maybe we'll go for another walk." If during the day the girl was in a fighting mood, she wanted to show and tell her boyfriend everything. Now it was romance. "Let's go." There was nothing to do anyway. They left the yard and went straight to the river. Michael was holding her hand. It was so nice. By the river they sat and kissed. A spectrum of new sensations opened up for Adriana today. Then they came home, and both of them went to bed at night. The girl felt the young man hugging her. It was unusual, even when she had to get up to start the dough. She didn't want to disturb him. It was the first morning she'd slept in, as if she'd overslept. "What are you doing asleep?" her mother asked her. "I don't know." Probably because we were out all night last night," the girl answered. She realized that now she was not free. She had a young man with whom she was ready to go anywhere. In the morning, Michael was surprised when he did not find the girl around. He went to the kitchen, but there was no one there either. The guy made coffee, sat down, and waited for someone to come. He woke up. A woman came through the door. "Yeah, where are you all?" He asked the question that had been plaguing him for almost an hour. "Adriana, at work, and we're out in the yard doing chores," she answered simply. Which job was he most interested in? "She'll be here in a minute to tell you." Betty thought, why pry into the youth's business? If Adriana didn't tell him anything, then it was necessary. Adriana returned an hour after their conversation with her mother. "Hi." He came over and kissed her. "You what?" "It's a good thing Mom's not around." Adriana was scared. "You smell like pies." Michael even squeezed his eyes shut. "Do you want me to make you some?" she asked me. "Who did you cook for before?" The guy tensed up. "You what?" "I sell them on the highway." She laughed. "Now I see where you got such capital." He was happy too. "Okay, if you want to get home tonight, you'll have to move." She looked at her watch. "What's later?" "There's no bus." He didn't feel like leaving. "No, not until early tomorrow morning." The girl knew the schedule by heart. "I see. Then he should go to work tomorrow." He sighed, not sad. She came close to the guy. She wanted to kiss him so badly. But her mother was going to be entering the house any minute. "It's okay," he squeezed her hand. Adriana saw Michael off. She waited with him for the bus. And here she couldn't help but kiss him goodbye. He got on the bus and waved. It felt so good. Now she knew she had a boyfriend from the city. It was several times faster to work with the dough machine. Now she didn't have to stand around and waste time kneading it. "Daughter, are you planning to go to college?" the mother inquired. "No. Why would I?" She made up her mind a long time ago. A man with an education can be useful anywhere. In her time, Betty didn't get anything either, but she didn't complain now. Who needed her diploma for cows? "Mom, I'm doing fine. And if something goes wrong, I'll think of something new." The girl was sure of herself. "Okay, I'm not bothering you." The woman saw that she was only annoying her daughter with her talk. Adriana now lived from Saturday to Saturday when her lover arrived. They would go out in the morning. Adriana would go out to trade and Michael would sleep at her house. "Adriana, are you two dating?" asked her mom quietly in the kitchen while her boyfriend was still awake. Yes, she blushed because she was embarrassed in front of her mom. "Good boy. Hang in there." His woman was pleased. "Where shall we go today?" The young man asked Adriana. "Shall we go to the forest for mushrooms?" she suggested. "Good. I haven't been in the woods in 100 years. Michael was even happy about it. They wandered through the woods, stopped in some places, kissed. "I love you. It's only been a few weeks." How were they dating? And Michael was already saying those big words. "And I love you." She was saying to him, "Maybe we'll get married." Michael held her hands. The fact that it had only been so short a time. After we first met, she rounded her eyes. "And you still don't get it?" "It's clear to me." He was taking her to his place. "Michael, what are we going to do then?" She used to dream about the city so she could move there. But now she realized that if she left, she'd be out of money. "What do you say?" He turned away. "What am I supposed to say?" Adriana really didn't understand it. "In the city. I live in a rented apartment. If you want, we can go there." He didn't know what she expected of him either. "No, I think we should stay in the village." She disagreed. The girl, "Then I'll be out of a job." He bowed his head. "You'll be helping me. Do you know how much business there is here?" She was sure of it. Okay with the offer. "I'm serious. But where we're going to live is something we need to think about. Let's not go any further." The couple went home with full pictures. "Tomorrow we can bake mushroom pies," Adriana said. "Do you want me to help you?" asked the young man. "And if you don't mind, and if you want to, why not?" And she didn't refuse any help. The next day, the guy saw what his future wife was really doing. They got up at 500 hours. Adriana set the dough to start, and she herself started on the stuffing. Paris, please, cabbage. That's how you did it on Michael. Aha. He never got up that early. That's why everything was falling apart for him right now. He almost cut himself twice. Why are you so awkward? Adriana asked him. You know, I'm not used to getting up so early, Michael told her. Oh, how gentle we are. The girl laughed back. After that, the young man and the girl loaded full bags of pies and drove to the highway. This is where you work. Michael, that was interesting. Yeah, is there something you don't like? Adriana didn't understand why the young man was acting like that today. I'm sorry, I'm fine. I just didn't sleep well tonight. He was watching different cars drive up and buy pies from his girlfriend. Do you want to try one yourself? Adriana suggested that he start selling them himself. No, what are you doing? I'm not gonna make it. For some reason, that's what he thought. Well, maybe you could at least try. She wouldn't calm down. Adriana, stop it. Even though it was his thing, he was embarrassed. You know, Michael, money can't smell. Adriana turned away. It was like she was offended by him. What's wrong with you? What are we going to fight over nothing? He went over to the girl and hugged her. You don't understand. This is my job. I take it very seriously. Adriana already regretted that she decided to show him everything today. Okay, I have the exact same job. I'm sorry I didn't get it. That's it. No more pies. She showed him the empty bags. Great. Home, then. Michael didn't understand why he had said all those things to the girl. They drove home. Adriana laid out on the table the money they had earned today. Michael looked at it all and saw that it was more than he could earn in a week. Wow, he whistled. What did you want? I wouldn't just do this for nothing. Adriana looked at her young man and she was happy. Whatever was he saying? The young man had to leave again. He didn't want to break up, but no one had canceled his work in the city. And again, they stood at the bus station, hugging, kissing. Will you write when you arrive? Adriana asked him. I will. He held her tightly against him once more. Michael worked for a week, and so did Adriana. They missed each other, but neither of them could decide where they would be better off. The girl insisted on the countryside, while the young man didn't want to leave the city. What does Michael say? Mom asked her daughter that she wanted to stay in the city. She answered, and her expression was very sad. I see you're against it. The woman felt sorry for her daughter. She didn't know why. She just worked hard. Now she was calling a young man to her, but he didn't even want to go to a ready-made house. What's in there then? But she didn't say anything out loud. Let them live as they are, or then she would be the last one. I don't want to talk about it yet, the girl admitted to her. For the rest of the summer, Michael and Adriana lived like that. He constantly came to her on weekends, and sometimes she went to him. Well, we're only going to see each other on Saturday. How did she put the question seriously? What do you suggest? He couldn't understand what Adriana wanted from him. Move to the village or organize your schedule so that you could work there during the day and come here in the evening. They both knew it was impossible. But it wasn't good either. Okay, I'll agree to move to the country. Somehow Michael agreed right away. And once he'd made up his mind, it was surprising Adriana. He'd recently really compared his spending on traveling back and forth. Thought he'd find something here. Good, then you'll help your father insulate my place now, she told the young man without any problems. He agreed immediately. From that moment, normal life together began. Should we rent a house? Adriana asked her mom. Do you not have enough space here? Didn't she understand? No, but we might be shy. The girl knew that wasn't true. But she wanted to be alone, not with the whole crowd. And live then. Why waste money? Didn't let Betty's daughter go. Michael, together with Adriana and her father, had gotten over everything quickly. It was warm and dry now. She bought herself a lot of appliances. Now she hardly did anything herself, with more and more pies every day. Who would have thought she'd turn out so much on some pies? Said the mother to her future son-in-law. The young people applied. They had to register in the city. They traveled there the day before, and already in the village local cult workers arranged an off-site registration, and then sit-downs in the club. They took away all the chairs and put big tables there. The bitterness was all that could be heard throughout the village. Adriana was happy. Sure, things in her life hadn't turned out as beautifully as she wanted, but that was good too. She continued her work, and Michael began to help his father-in-law. "Does your work make any difference?" his wife asked him when he got home. "What good is it? I wish we'd stayed in town. There was work there," he said. The young man was in a bad mood. "What are you saying?" Adriana was afraid to talk about the city. She didn't want to go there at all. Nothing. He knew she wouldn't go anywhere with him because she was fine here. You live in the middle of nowhere. You don't need anything, and the money piles up. One day the men came home from work. When Michael entered the room, Adriana smelled alcohol on him. "What are you doing? It's not like you haven't tried it at all." She couldn't believe her husband would do such a thing. "Your father offered me a small drink. I didn't refuse," he replied abruptly. "All right, come on, go to bed." She threw back the blanket on the bed. After that, Adriana seriously considered renting a house. She realized that if her husband drank with her father, one time would not stop there. The very next day, she went to the head, asked if there were any houses available. "Adriana, I thought you were coming to see me after the wedding." A man said to her, "Should I have?" She got a little nervous. "Sure, we have a cabin. I can give it to you." He laughed. "How do you mean allocate it for free?" She couldn't believe they were giving anything away for free at this time. "Yeah, but it's on village land. You can do whatever you want with it, just don't sell it. And of course, if there's an emergency, you'll have to pay money for it," the man in front of her said. "I'm in." She signed all the papers, came home. "Michael, we're moving," the girl said. "What do you mean, where?" Mom couldn't believe it was actually happening. "Turns out we were supposed to get a house. We didn't know." She looked at her mom. "Did she know?" "I hear you." Betty sat down in her chair. She wasn't in the mood. "What are you so upset about?" "I didn't go to the city. I went next door." Adriana was sure that things would get better for them now. The things that weren't much loaded into the tractor cart, and they were able to move everything in one go. The cabin was small. It was cozy inside. The room and kitchen Adriana and her mom had already had here. They cleaned everything, hung it up, and arranged the curtains. "How do you like our house?" Adriana asked her husband. "It's fine." Michael hadn't been himself lately. "Listen, we have a lot of men who go on shift. Maybe you could get a job there." She gave him an idea. "Why, I don't mind. And the money's good. And you don't have to worry about it." He's kind of excited about it. "Then go to the breakfast bear, who lives next door to your mother. I'll check with him." Adriana. It was hurtful to hear the words eyesore. Well, he put his arm around his wife, and they went to bed. The first night was uneasy. The neighbor's dog barked so much that no sleep came. But fatigue took its toll, and Adriana and her husband fell asleep. "But I've made the arrangements. I'll send the documents tomorrow." And a month later, Michael spoke joyfully. "You say that as if you're fed up with me." She looked at him resentfully. "It's just that I'm tired of sitting around doing nothing. That's why I was excited about new prospects." He kissed his wife. "Good, if that's the case." She looked up at him, her eyes slightly moist with tears. "Michael will be leaving now. Move back in." "What are you going to do there?" Betty said to her daughter. "No, I'm comfortable. No one bothers me." And I didn't agree with her either. Adriana. "Well, live alone," the mother said angrily. "Why are you taking the fence again?" Her daughter came over and hugged her. "It's okay." At that moment, the father entered the house, who was out with his friends again. "Daddy." And again the daughter looked at him. And he didn't say anything and went to the couch. How am I supposed to be alone here? No one to help me at all. Betty started wailing. I don't get it. Adriana, you used to be the go-to guy. And now you can't wait. Betty cried. Adriana came home. Michael had set the table. She stood there looking at all this beauty. Did I forget that today is a holiday? She asked him. No, I just thought I'd glorify it by going away. He said cheerfully. I feel like I'm seeing off the bride's son. Adriana sat down on a chair. Something was beginning to displease Michael again. How was she reacting to the fact that he was just excited about his new job? That evening they sat well at the table, discussed everything, and even imagined when Michael would bring the first paycheck, where they would spend it. I'd like a vacation somewhere, she said. I wouldn't say no to that either. He took her hand. Then we'll have to get the passports. Her eyes were already wide open, as if this wasn't going to happen anytime soon, but tomorrow. I think we'll have to save up a little and then we'll go, her husband told her. According to Adriana, it was good. Michael had left. Now he wouldn't be home for a month. Adriana had no time to be bored. She decided she was going to make her turkey place into some sort of diner. Now there were not only pies, but tea and coffee. Drivers could drive up, buy, and then enjoy a rotting beverage and a tasty pie in the parking lot. Did you wait so long outside the house for her? Her mother decided to go out not just in the morning, but all day. She told me that she had bought a microwave and could heat right there. I'm visiting. The woman's a little miffed. Why don't you come in? Do you know where the keys are? The daughter was surprised. I don't know. I didn't dare without you. And only now mother and daughter entered the gate. It was beautiful at home. Adriana had been cooking all morning. The mother sat down at the table. She sighed. Something had happened, the daughter guessed. Your father. She raised her eyes to Adriana. There was a small bruise under one of them. What had gotten into him? She didn't understand. I don't know. Every day with her friends lately, Betty sighed again. And how you put up with all this? I have kicked you out a long time ago. Adriana got up and put the kettle on the stove. I can't. He's the boss, the woman reasoned. Yes, he is. He only poured one name, and Adriana poured tea. They sat at the table with Mom some more. And then the woman got ready to go home. It would have stayed. The girl suggested it. No, I have my own house. Betty left the house. Adriana sat down on the couch and decided to write a message to her husband. She had already written to him, but either he didn't read them or they didn't reach her. He didn't pick up the phone either, no matter how many times she dialed him. All right, if you don't want to talk, we won't talk, she said and put the phone aside. Aside from that, the girl had a lot of other things to do. She filled out the necessary forms to apply for passports, sent them, and waited for a reply. Afterward, the girl opened pictures and stories about the beaches and hotels that are on the sandy seashore. How beautifully set, she and considered everything that came across. Michael wrote that he was coming in 2 days. It was such a joy. Adriana immediately began to prepare. And she boiled some collards, because her husband loves it. After that, she put the vegetables on the salads. When Michael opened the door, there was a table with many different genders waiting for him. Hello, darling. His wife ran up to him. Only now she felt how much she missed him. Adriana, come on. He was glad to see his family too. But what's the story? They sat down at the table. On such an occasion, Adriana, even with a bottle of wine. Everything's fine, only we're very tired. That is, all the time I want. And you are not enough, he laughed. You get the job done. She stood up and put him in a plate of salad. Of course, there is nothing complicated, he began to say with his mouth full. And the pay, as she watched in anticipation. What was her husband going to say to her now? Oh, and he forgot the most important thing. He tapped himself in his pockets and then pulled out an impressive wad of money. Wow, She looked at them. I was also a little shocked when I saw how much they wanted to pay me. The husband admitted, "Listen, we will definitely fly somewhere, and from the next paycheck." The girl was happy. By that time, the passports should have been ready. Of course, everything for his favorite wife. He put his arm around her and led her towards the bedroom. "And what about dinner?" She looked at the table. "It's not going anywhere," her husband whispered in her ear. Afterward, they sat and talked for a long time. Michael told where they traveled, what they did there. At first, Adriana was interested, but when once again he started talking about some bushes, she got bored. "I completely forgot that you have to get up early tomorrow." He had already spoken today. She showed him the clock. "Let's go to bed then." And they retired to the bedroom again. The next day, they went to her parents' house, went for a walk, and that was all after Adriana came home from work. "Can you believe it? I looked at the calendar today, and it's time for me to go again," Michael told her tonight. "Yeah, I thought about it too, that the month went by too fast. It was sad to break up. But to tell you the truth, Adriana was so tired this month. She had to work, and then she also had to go out with her husband. Now that he was leaving, she wanted to work in peace, miss him, and meet him with renewed vigor. While Michael was away, the girl booked the vouchers. She could not be happy that the passports came on time. When Michael was home, the last day, they went and got them. And now Adriana was choosing a place where they would rest like white people. Adriana herself does not know why her choice fell on the Arab Emirates. She had looked at so many places, but she did not see such beauty as there. It was decided unequivocally that they would fly there. Hello was home again. "Michael, darling, let me tell you right away, we only have 2 days to get ready." "Well, you do, because I'd already got everything ready." She pointed to a room where there was a huge suitcase. "Did you put a down jacket and a fur coat in there?" Surprised husband. "Well, that you start there all the essentials." She took offense. "All right, I'm just kidding." He kissed her. Today they were not to suitcases. But all the next day, Michael wondered what besides underwear and a towel he could use in there. Michael and Adriana were only at the airport, but they already liked everything. The girl only sighed. How nice it would be for them in a few hours. She began to annoy her husband with her talk about Arabs. "Why? We're going to this country. We should know a little about it," she said indignantly. After the airplane, in which it was so uncomfortable to fly all these hours, and finally they are standing on the ground. "Here we are," loudly shouted the girl. "Now they will definitely say that the village has arrived," whispered in her husband's ear. "Why are you embarrassed of me?" asked him the girl. "Just do not yell. Everything will be fine," asked her Michael. "Okay. If you want, I can keep quiet at all." She turned away. He could not believe it. He saw their bus, called Adriana, and they went along with the other tourists. The hotel was cool, just like the girl had seen in the picture. They were quickly settled in and now could fully enjoy the sea and sun. "To the beach," the wife asked her husband. "Maybe to the bar first." He looked at her. "Okay, you go to the bar, and I'll go to the beach." She took a towel and left the room. Michael never showed up at the beach that day. Adriana was not upset about it. She was fine on her own. She was sunbathing in the sun and not living in the warm waters of the sea. Everything was wonderful. In the evening, when Adriana returned to the room, her husband was singing on the bed, sprawled out stargazing. "Drunk," she said in her heart. After that, she took a shower and went downstairs to see what was going on while the pool music was playing. Adriana was just enjoying the evening. The next day, they took a boat tour. The husband, unfortunately, couldn't go on it, but Adriana went. It was worth the money. "Hello." A local man approached her when they were already on deck. "Hi," said cheerfully. "Adriana, you are all alone." He spoke Russian well, but there was a strong accent. As you can see, she waved her hands. After that, this man came up to her more than once, complimented her, said beautiful words. Adriana just melted from how good he was and how he spoke. "I wish I had a husband like you said," she said directly to the man's face. "Such a woman should be happy." He sang like a nightingale. "Your words to God's ears," she said quietly. "Let's meet tomorrow." They suggested it. "Why am I always alone anyway? Let's do it." Adriana was sure that her husband would be at the bar again today. "Then we have a deal, Adriana." The man helped her down to the ground and climbed back up. All the men drove back to the hotel, and Adriana with them. Just as she had anticipated, the husband was back at the bar. "Do you want to sit here all day?" She approached him. "What do you suggest? Everything here is free." Michael was already pretty drunk. "Okay, I'm not interested." She turned around and went to her room to change. Adriana waited for him to follow her, catch up with her, apologize. But that didn't happen. The morning was sunny. Adriana put on a transparent nika that reached her knees and went to the beach where she had an appointment. "Hello, Queen," and was already waiting for her there. "Hello." She blushed. It felt good to her to be treated like that by him. He took her hand and led her away from the beach. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You'll see." He was still holding her hand. The girl felt such masculine strength coming from him. She could not believe that such men even existed. After a while, the red roofs showed themselves, but it was not quite clear what it was. It turned out to be a small cafe right on the beach. Fastened carpenters stood in the middle of the water above them. And there were those brightly colored roofs. Joe helped Adriana down. They settled down on the cushions. It was the Titanic and the coolness from the water. "It's nice here," she told him. "I wouldn't have brought you here otherwise," he said in a velvet voice. "Let's order something," the girl asked him. "And if you want, show me." He called for a waiter. They served various exotic fruits, which the girl had never tasted. She had never seen them. The order was placed. Now all that was left was to wait for it to arrive. "Thank you for this paradise." Adriana looked at her companion. "Thank you, beautiful." He kissed her hand. What words the girl had not heard today. She was having such a good time for the first time. When all the fruit was eaten, the illuminating liquid was drunk. The waiter brought the bill. "I'll pay it," made a gesture to the man. "Good." At that moment, a thought flashed through Adriana's mind. What if he had told her to pay? And she had everything left in the room. After that, they walked along the edge of the sea some more, and the girl hurried home. She didn't see Joe again for the rest of the day, but she wanted to see him when they had to leave the next day. Adriana made up her mind. She took her money with her, put it in a small purse, put on a light dress, and went to where the yachts were parked. She realized she worked for one of them. "Hello, Joe." She saw him on one of the decks. "Oh, hi." Immediately, he went to meet her. "I'm flying out tomorrow, and I'd like to spend the evening with you in one exhale," she said. "Okay, only I have things to do for now." He pointed to where he had just been, and no way to put it off. She made a sad face. "If I put it off, they won't give me any money." He was being honest with her. That's how it seemed to the girl. "It's okay, if that's the problem I have." She opened her purse. "Then go ahead." And he spoke through his white teeth. Once again, he led her to an unusual place that was right there on the beach. Now it was some sort of bungalows with tables inside. "Where do you find such beautiful places?" asked Adriana. "I know how to please the queen." He gave a thumbs up. If he didn't order anything last time, he was on top of his game today. At one point, Adriana even thought she wouldn't have enough money to pay for it. "Why are you sad?" he asked. "She is so reluctant to leave here," she said honestly. "Hopefully, because of me." He smiled his beautiful smile again. "Maybe you had something to do with it too." She was embarrassed. Later it was over. Adriana had given away almost all the money she had with her. But today she didn't spare anything, just as long as the handsome man would say nice words to her and be there for her. She returned to the hotel. Her husband was asleep. She didn't expect anything else from him. In the morning, They were put on a bus that took them to the airport. After landing, takeoff, landing, and now they were home again. How'd you burn out? Considering Betty's daughter. Yeah, there's good sunshine. She pulled out the souvenirs she brought on the table. What about Michael? A woman asked. It was better not to ask. Adriana turned away to avoid looking her mother in the eye. A fight, she realized. No, we just vacationed in different places, the girl said. Michael was at home lying in bed. He still couldn't get over what he had done there on vacation. Did you remember anything? Adriana laughed at him. Yeah, he nodded. Good for you. The girl thought that next time she would go there alone. Her husband had to pack for another shift again. Adriana saw him off and sat down at the computer. When they parted in the hall, he handed her a piece of paper on which his mail was written. 2 days after her arrival, Adriana wrote to him, but he did not reply. She tried again. Maybe she had written something wrong, and again he didn't answer her. Then the girl thought that since he worked there, he had a lot of people like her. Why write? Michael arrived once again. He was so tired it was scary to look at him. He'd never been like this before, she wondered. Pour me a drink, Michael asked. Only now she realized that the fatigue was not from work, but from something else, which most likely the man was doing on the train after the shift, when they were going home. Are you jamming all the way? She asked her husband. And that we after such a long shift cannot even relax. For the first time in a while he raised his voice at her. Oh, Michael, you'll be lost. She put some homemade wine on the table for him. It's not up to you, he told her, and started unpacking the containers. Adriana did not want to watch all this. She decided to walk to her mom's for now. Hi. What are you doing up so late? Mom was sitting at the table. I can't stay home. For the first time in her life, Adriana honestly admitted to her mother that this was how she looked at her husband, who was asleep on the couch. Yeah, that's what my daughter nodded her head. No way. Betty covered her eyes with her hands. Adriana continued to work. She was doing it even more now, because she didn't want to be at home. Listening to her husband's ramblings, he and the men must be talking about their wives and girlfriends. So it turns out they're all walkers. The girl was quietly selling cakes, tea, and coffee. She really liked to please people who thanked her for it. Come again, she said after the departing customers. When Michael was on another watch, the girl piked a message on the computer. She quickly sat down for it, opened the mail, and oh joy, she wrote Joe. How long had she waited for this letter? What's wrong? She wrote to him. Why did you take so long to reply? Adriana, I'm in a terrible situation. I need money urgently. I wonder if you could give me some. I'll pay you back, I swear. A man wrote back. Sure. How much do you need? She was willing to help because it was such a nice man. I got $1,000 back. I'll wire it to you right away. Just give me the account number. There was not a single thought in her head. After she got the coveted numbers, she immediately transferred everything to the account. Thank you. She saw the message on the screen. Butterflies fluttered inside. She was happy he hadn't forgotten her. When things got bad, he turned to his queen for help. Adriana flew on wings for the first couple of days. She checked every hour to see if he'd write her anything. But Adriana, she got no more letters. Now when her husband came home, she just didn't talk to him. And on one visit, she gave him an ultimatum. It was either me or these friends of yours. With all the consequences, she told him. What does that mean? He didn't get it because he was already on the horn. Go away, Adriana said quietly. Inside she had nothing more for this man. Adriana, I love you. He fell at her feet. I don't think you love me. You love her more. She nodded at the bottle on the table. Don't drive her away, he begged. If this happens again tomorrow, you take your stuff and get out of here. She was determined. After the girl told her mother about all this, she just cried. Daughter, why should you take it out on him? He'll get better. You just have to kill him a little. She told her, "I see how I see my Golubov, all the work in the house on you." And he spit. "Adriana, stay alone," sadly said the woman. "So you're afraid of it?" Adriana smiled. Joe immediately came to mind. "No, I'm just saying I didn't want to discuss my family, Betty." "Then don't tell me if you don't know." The girl went home and went to bed. In the morning, as usual, dough, stuffing, boiling water, and on the road. For some reason, there were few customers that day. It was slushy on the roads. I guess that's why nobody left the house. But she still managed to sell half of them. She came home, and Michael was in the same condition. She didn't say anything, took his bag, threw his stuff in it, and pushed him out the door. And then she pushed her husband in and walked him out the same way. That's all. And she fucked her hands like flour. After that, she sat down at the computer. "Hey, Joe, what happened to you? I haven't heard from you." "No word for so many days," Adriana wrote. She sat and looked where nothing else was written. The girl waited, but Joe never responded. She had already gotten up to clean the house. Suddenly, a bell rang. It was a text message. Adriana's hands even shook. She threw all her hands, wiped them right on the hem, sat down, and began to read. "Hello." The one she had been waiting for so long was writing to her. "You helped me a lot last time. I got out of it. I'm so happy for you that everything worked out so well. Adriana, and I didn't need any money, just as long as he wrote. You know what I'm thinking. The light of my eyes, that you'd come to me. I can't live without you. I want things to be good between us. I started my business, got a little out of season, lost my business. I was wondering if you could help me out. One more time." He asked Adriana for money again. Of course, she had already prepared to transfer it. "Then send the same amount." The man didn't bother. "It's done." A message from her. "You have no idea how much I miss your eyes. You're the most beautiful. What's happened to me over the years?" He showered me with compliments. "I'm so glad you wrote me. Don't be silent. Let me know how you're doing." At the end, she put a smiley face kiss. "Soon we'll be together, my queen." That was his last message for the day. "Mom, can I help you with something?" Her happy daughter came to her, but then she saw her husband sitting at the table. "Don't swear, he's leaving tomorrow." Betty told her, "Okay, if you know everyone who is doing this, then be happy." She walked out of her mother's and went home. But even that couldn't ruin the mood she was in. The next time Joe wrote was 2 weeks later. Now he needed money again, but to pay the taxes on the house so she could come there, or God forbid they would take it away. Once again, Adriana sent it to him. Her savings were running out very quickly. She realized that if he asked her a few more times, there would be nothing left at all. "I'll probably go to live in another country soon," Adriana said to her mom. "Why?" She didn't understand. "I will live and work there," calmly said the girl. "I don't understand you. To a city that's close by. You did not want to. And now you are flying to another country." The woman looked at her daughter with frightened eyes. "Do not worry, everything will be fine," said the girl. She came home. There was a message on the screen. Her heart rolled faster. Adriana realized that it was her beloved Joe writing to her, and it was really him. "Hi." He started off beautifully. As always, "Hello." She would write to her favorite, but that was just her thinking, so she was shy for now. "I want to tell you that I've sorted out all my affairs, and now I'm waiting for you to visit." I put a heart at the end of the alley. "Of course, darling, I've been ready for this for a long time." She was sitting at her desk, her palms sweating with excitement. "When can I expect you?" Oh, sweetheart." He didn't say anything about tickets or anything. The rest was just about deadlines. "I'll look up the tickets, and I'll leave as soon as I can." She really was glowing like the sun right now. "Love you, my beautiful goddess." He said goodbye to her. The first thing to do was to get a divorce. That's why Adriana went to town. Afterward, she went to the ticketing place. She looked for the next flight. She was fine with it. It looked like she'd be at her macho man's place in a week. "Mom, I'm going to Dubai," she announced to a woman when she got back from the city. "There's a woman sitting in a chair. I can't tell you what's going on yet, but there's a handsome prince waiting for me there." The girl blushed. "You look, just don't get burned," warned her Betty. "Everything will be fine. I know it for sure." Adriana was confident in herself and her man. She had all her papers and things packed. Now it was only a matter of time. "Olenka, hello." She came to the neighbor girl again. "Hello." She was surprised. "Listen, it's a shame to leave your business. Maybe you'll take care of it for a while." Adriana asked, "What can I do?" The one's eyes immediately sewed, and she knew how much Adriana was making there. "You owe me 20% while I'm gone, and then we'll figure it out." That was the deal. "All right, I'll give the money to your mom." That was the deal. Now I could leave with a calm heart. Back home, Adriana checked everything one more time. She took all the necessary clothes, documents, money, some jewelry. All that was left was to wait for the day when her plane would be there to take her to her lover. "Mommy, I'm leaving tomorrow. So you want me to watch the house?" Adriana came to her. "Okay, you think I wouldn't have done it without your reminders?" Told her Betty back. "No, I just don't feel like saying goodbye. After all, it's not even a few kilometers away." They hugged. "Where are you going?" Dad went into the kitchen. "She's just going on vacation abroad," Betty told her husband. "Well, let it be so." Adriana agreed with her. She took her bags home and went to the station. The bus took a long time to jolt on the scraps. Adriana had never felt like this before. Now it felt like a washboard. Finally, they arrived in the city, from which it would still take 3 hours to get to the airport by train. But Adriana was not intimidated by any difficulties. She knew that there in a distant country she was loved and welcomed. "Hello." Everyone was very polite. Adriana was being screened and checked in. "Go ahead." She was invited onto the plane. She took her seat, closed her eyes to get some sleep. Her ears popped. So the plane was gaining altitude. After that, calmness. That's how the girl fell asleep. She was awakened only when they started serving food. It was not very comfortable, but she did not refuse. "Dear passengers, our plane." She heard the voice of the stewardess. It meant that she had finally arrived, and in a few minutes she would see her handsome boyfriend. People crowded in as they descended, traveled, and received their luggage. Adriana was standing with her suitcase in her hand when she saw him. He was walking so tall, clean, handsome. "Queen, you've come to see me," he hugged her. "Hi." She could smell the scent she couldn't forget until now. "Let's go. I'll drive you like a goddess." He gave her his hand. They reached the car, got in, and drove off. "How are you doing?" Adriana asked on the way. "I'm fine. I might even say great." He was showing her okay. "I'm so glad we're back together." She wanted to say something warm to the man. "I couldn't live without you." It was like being in the dark the whole time. He put his hand on her shoulder. They drove for a long time. It seemed like the end of the city, but Adriana said nothing. Finally, they pulled up to a house. It was small, beautiful. "Your hand, Queen." He opened the door for Adriana. "You are such a gallant suitor," she laughed. "Come in." He led her into the house. After that, they went into some room. Joe put Adriana's suitcase by the window. He offered her something to eat, a drink of water. She didn't refuse. Then the couple sat down at the table. "How am I going to live here? I don't know the language at all." The girl asked him. "It's okay. You'll get used to it." He smiled. There was some porridge and chips on the table. Adriana thought it was traditionally a bit skewed. Afterwards, she asked Oleg where she could set up. "In this room for now. But tonight I'll show you another one," promised the girl. "Okay, I'm ready for anything." She smiled all the time because she was so happy to be with this man. "I'm so happy about it. But there's one catch. There's no food in the house at all." I've put all my money into business. Couldn't you buy something? He looked at her with those honest eyes. Joe, anything you say. She was ready to go to pieces just to make her man feel good. They left the house again, drove down the street, and stopped in front of a big store. Joev took out a large basket. It seemed to Adriana then that he began to put everything in it. The girl was surprised to herself, but said nothing aloud. At the checkout, she had to shell out a good amount of money, but she had no regrets, for now she would be with him and would definitely help him in everything. And now home the goddess spoke. They quickly drove back. Then the man asked Adriana to make him something to eat. The dinner was lovely. Afterwards, they talked about how they met. Then Adriana admired the man, and then he kissed her and caressed her into the bedroom. My love, he asked her a question. Yes, she exhaled. Even just his touch and scent alone made Adriana go crazy. She might as well not have been asked where they would go after this. Joe lifted her into his arms. They went into a room where there was a large bed. He laid her there himself, lay down beside her, and slowly began to undress her. Are you so tender? He whispered to her. And you are so passionate, she answered him. Adriana had no one but her husband, so she did not know what to expect from this man. Goddess, he kissed her from heels to top of her head. Or God, she echoed him. After the intimacy occurred, the man lay down next to her. At that moment, the light in the room turned on. A woman ran in who often said something, but not a single word was incomprehensible. Who is it? Adriana was frightened. Key's translator advised her. He himself lay very calmly. Adriana took the phone with trembling hands. She did not understand what was going on and why Joe was so calm. Finally, she found the function the man was talking about, selected the language and pressed turn on. I am this man's wife, and if I call the police now, you're going to jail, screamed the woman. What's going on again? She asked Joe. Give her your passport. Also calmly said Joe. Adriana. Why? She didn't understand. Otherwise, she will now call the authorities, and you will go to jail for a long time. In our country, you can't have sex with a married man. It was a wall of stone. Not a muscle in his face wavered. I love you. Adriana cried. I love you, Adriana cried. And I love you. But it won't help you. He looked at the woman he called his wife, and then pointed to Adriana's purse on the suitcases. Aha, just said. She rushed to the things. DK revealed her passport, money and jewelry. Everything was in her hands. I don't get it, screamed the guest. That's when Joe forcefully slapped her across the face. After that, it was all a blur. She was being dragged somewhere. She woke up from a pungent odor when she opened her eyes and sat on the floor. Turns out she was in some kind of basement. Joe, she screamed, but no one heard her. Help, cried Adriana. So she sat in that room for about 3 days. At one point, she just lost track of time. And then he came to her. Her God, she said, a few days ago, he shouted to her. Joe, what's going on? Why are you doing this to me? I've done so much for you. She started crying and crawled to him. Get away. He almost kicked her voice with his foot. The man's was no longer so gentle and velvet. He was angry. What do you want? She asked. Is there still money in the account? He asked. What money? In what account? Adriana did not understand. All this time, she had not been fed or fed. Adriana, said he with that accent with which they call all Russian girls, that she raised her eyes to him. Do you have money? It was obvious that he didn't like to repeat himself. I do. She couldn't lie because she thought it would help her. On transferring everything to me, he handed her the laptop. The girl did as she was told. She hoped he would let her go after that, but he just snatched the computer out of her hands. Listen to me carefully. He sat over her ear. Yeah, she thought there'd be instructions. I'm going to take you upstairs now. Chain bike to a table that's built into the floor. You'll cook for my wife and me. Do whatever we tell you. You'll sleep here. I'll come over once in a while. At that moment, he ran his hand over her cheek. What did that mean? She didn't understand. It was like a movie. It means that if you don't give me more money in a few days, I'll send you to a brothel, and they'll spare no expense for you. He laughed. Asshole. She threw him in the back. But Joe was walking. He kept laughing. Adriana sat in the dark basement. She didn't know what to do now. She was in a foreign country with no papers, no phone. What should she do? Who would rescue her? There were so many questions in her head and not a single answer to them. Adriana cried. How she could only believe this scammer. It was only now that she compared everything and realized that she had just fallen for this same slave. You're here yelling at her hours later. No, gone, she snarled. We're hungry. He put a chain around her leg and led her like a dog. Why are you doing this to me? Saying those words to me. And now I was still trying to make him feel sorry for me. Girl, shut up. He yanked the chain. So Adriana almost fell. She stood at the stove, cooking by herself, looking around the axle, but there was nothing of the sort around. The idea of a knife flashed through her mind. What if she threw it at him with it? What if it didn't hit? But she was really good at throwing them at school. What are you up to? Joe said to her as if he'd read her mind. Nothing. She was chopping vegetables. When it was done, the man took her down to the basement again and brought her a bucket of water. Pray, he told her. And in the night he came. By now, there was nothing pleasant Adriana felt anymore, only disgust for that hair freak. He did all his business and got up. Am I going to stay here again? She looked up at him. No, I'll put you in your crib, he said snidely. The girl cried again. During that night, she had examined the whole wall, windows that had bars on them. Would you rather go to jail than sit here? She shouted loudly, but she knew no one could hear her. Adriana lay on the mattress. She was cold. She was going crazy with what was going on in her head. Get up. He came after her again. What do you want her to do tomorrow? Nothing. She shut up. He slapped her face with the palm of his hand. Day after day went by like that. Adriana didn't know what day or date it was. She was trying to find a loophole to get out of this unfortunate house. I need money. Again he came to her. I don't have any more. She was telling the truth. So I called your beloved mother. He held her phone in his hand. She jumped up to take it away from him. And what do you think? It wouldn't work. He put his hand up. Adriana was crying again. At some point the girl felt a draft. It had never happened here before. She groped around for where the air was coming from. It was the ventilation. She tried to pull the grate. It gave way. Fear shook her inside and out. My queen, I'm coming for you. She heard a voice on the steps. Adriana quickly put the bars back in place and lay down on the mattress as if she had slept there. So, tired, sleep. He sat down next to her. After she didn't answer him, he got up and poured cold water on her from a bucket. Are you crazy? It's not hot enough in here. She shouted at him, and at the same moment she received a slap. You'd better keep quiet, or they'll do something else to you. He squeezed her cheeks hard. Yeah, fuck you. She didn't care where she went, but she had to get out of this basement. At night, when Joe left, she removed the ventilation grate again, and it was impossible to pull herself up by her arms. She had eaten very little in the meantime, so the girl used all the same bucket. When she tapped it on, she lurked like a mouse, but she heard nothing. Adriana climbed into the pipe and crawled forward, but just as she expected. At the end was a propeller that was spinning. It must not have worked before, so she couldn't feel it blowing somewhere. Shit. Anna couldn't help herself. After crawling back to the basement, putting the grate back in place, she realized she didn't have the energy for a second try today. My joy. A man walked toward her this morning. Not a good morning to you either. She looked at him with a glare. If you're rude, I'll punish you. He smiled. Yeah, much more than that. She walked over to the table where she was always cooking. While she was doing all this, She saw that there were wooden sticks on the table and decided to take them with her. "What have you got there?" "Put it back," said the tyrant to her. "Asshole." Once again, she said. At that moment, Adriana saw a calendar by the number that was marked today. She realized that she had been here for over a month. Something said, "Sweetie," interjected at her. "What did you hear?" She continued to cut and stir. After that, she was sent to the basement again. The girl used to eat what was left on the table while the dish was cooking. Now she'd take some with her if Joe didn't see it. Today she was carrying a few slices of bread. Joe hadn't been heard from all day. Adriana took up the bucket again. Suddenly, its muzzle clattered. The girl was startled. Then her eyes lit up. The Dushka. She would be the one to help her. Adriana remembered her father teaching her how to pull out the noose when the bucket in the well was breaking from that very part. "Thank you, Daddy," she said in a whisper and carefully removed the thin but sturdy iron. And again, she set the bucket up, sliding it inside the pipe. As at that moment she heard footsteps. Adriana did not remember herself from fear. She got out of there so quickly. And the grate and placed herself on the mattress. "She was waiting for me." He came to her. "No," she was shaking like a leaf. "Well, we'll just have to put up with a named guest." He tore off her shirt, which was the only piece of clothing she had. After he left, and some time passed, Adriana tried again, and must crawl to the screw, abruptly shoved the sole from the bucket there. And it stopped. She herself doesn't know how she managed to squeeze through that little hole that let her out. But Adriana had done it. The girl realized that she couldn't show her face on the street like that. She saw something hanging outside the house. It was a tablecloth or a blanket, but it didn't matter. Adriana wrapped it around herself, and in it she walked down Night Street. It was scary, but she had to hide somewhere, and she went up to the roof of one of the houses. There was grass growing there. You couldn't see it. It was soft at the same time. Can you imagine? Someone stole a plate from a neighbor at night. I heard Russian speech. But at the same moment, a man said something not in Russian. Adriana understood. The woman was probably on the phone. What to do? What to do? She wanted to cry, but she couldn't relax. It was good that no one had noticed her here before nightfall. The girl realized that the grass on the roof was growing for a reason, some flowers tending the edges. She walked down to the sidewalk, determined to find some store to ask for something to eat. "Hey," she heard from the side of the house. Adriana got scared. I started to back away. A man approached her. He was dressed almost identically to her. "Hello, help me." She pleaded without shaking her head that she didn't understand anything. She tried to get away from him. She realized that this man was in rags for a reason. Maybe he's capturing his own kind and then turning them over to his masters. "Where are you taking me?" She was afraid to scream. He put his finger to his lips. They reached an archway. There the man jumped, and it was already as if on another street. The girl saw some boxes, some boards, some children sitting there, where we seemed to her that she was in a nightmare, and now she's going to wake up. And she's at her mom's house. A woman came out to meet us. She was the same indeterminate age as the one who brought her here. They handed her some bread. "Thank you." She nodded. Then a man started a fire and some iron utensils right outside. Adriana saw that he was splashing from some kind of jar. She moved closer, getting warmer. Adriana thought of taking the jar with her, but who would just give it to her? She looked around, and it looked like the lowest stratum of the population lived here. "How do you live here?" she cried. The woman gave her some kind of pizza. It smelled so bad that Adriana almost threw up. She stood up, gestured for her to go, but the man grabbed her arm again. He said something and pointed to the sky. The son guessed the girl, those nodded their heads. But how could she walk the streets unhindered when everyone would see her? She agreed with them anyway that they were in the basement. When Adriana lay down on one of the boards they offered her, these people up above was a canopy. She thought, where is she going? Who will believe her? Tears flowed with renewed vigor from her eyes. Adriana was so angry that nothing could stop her. She thought she would stay here until tomorrow and then get revenge on Joe. "Can I have this?" she asked the woman in the morning, pointing to the bottle. The woman only spread her hands. "I don't know what it was. Either I don't understand or I don't know. I'll take it." Adriana decided to do something different, and she took what she needed and put it in her pocket. The woman started to say something. She took out what she had just put in her pocket, then went around the corner and brought back the same one, but a new one. And the matches showed Adriana the gesture of a lighter. They looked at each other like two crazy people. Nobody understood anything. After Adriana began to remember the game of crocodile, where all actions are described without the help of sounds, and she started to show a fire. But in order to have one, you have to light it. Then the woman understood and brought her a lighter. "Here's thanks, kind people," she said. The girl waited until it was dark. She walked back to where they came from, the poor people. But no matter how much she told her to, she could not find the road from which they had come. Had to go back and gesticulate again. The old man seemed to understand her. He took her hand again and led her to that very ark. How interesting. She herself had passed by here many times, but had not noticed it, and once again the girl thanked her already on the road. First, she went to the house that had grass on the roof. By it she could orient herself where that ill-fated cellar, in which she spent many days. This was definitely it. She saw that the place where the vent was. It was definitely him. She saw the place where the vent was plugged with plywood. Adriana whispered a couple times with her foot. The plywood flew off. Then she spilled the hot liquid wherever she could and threw the rest into the vent and set it on fire. "Help me. They're keeping me in the basement." She screamed and ran in the direction where she could hear Russian speech. The girl climbed onto the roof, where she spent the whole night in the grass, and then looked down. "Help." She saw a woman in the window. "Who are you?" "Oh my God." She clutched her heart. "My name is Adriana. I'm from Russia. I was called to visit by your neighbor Joe, and he himself forcibly kept me in the basement." She spoke quickly. At that moment there was a loud and terrible explosion. The woman in the house crouched down, and Adriana pressed her head to the ground. She was sure it was the gas in Joe's house that had exploded. And then a car with flashers arrived. The woman Adriana had asked for help from showed her where she was. They barely got her off the roof because she was struggling. Local homeless people were found and accused of arson, but they pointed out to Adriana that she was the one who took the liquid. The girl was brought to the station, and an interpreter was assigned to her. "I told you I did it. I just resisted." She couldn't explain for an hour why she did it. The man in uniform said something fast and inarticulate to the interpreter, confusingly translating. "Well, what am I going to get the death penalty now?" She looked at the man who was now serving as an interpreter between her and the police. "No, perhaps a fine and deportation. Banned from crossing the border forever." He told her, "Yes, I'm both hands in favor." Adriana nodded her head several times. She was taken to a cell, and they discussed something for a long time. The footage was all over the news. What a miracle that Michael was watching the news. He stopped drinking. He'd gotten smart and was renting again in the city. "That's Adriana, my Adriana." He heard her say she was kept in the basement, crying. The man didn't sit still. He called one number, called another, and wondered what to do in such cases. But it all worked out. Adriana was indeed deported, and she was able to return to Russia without documents. A trial was held there. She was recognized as a victim, so no charges were assigned. Just one fine for defacing city property. She drove to the village thin and embittered against the world. Adriana heard a man's voice from behind her, shuddered, turned around. Michael stood in front of her. "What are you doing here?" She asked him in a husky voice. "I saw you on the news. Tried to do something, but I didn't know how. Then I waited to hear from you, but I didn't." You could see he wanted to feel sorry for her, to hold her close. But the ex-husband was afraid. "Forgive me at this point," spoke Adriana. "For what?" He came up, put his arms around her, and pressed her against him. "How stupid was I?" She was sobbing. Nothing happens to everyone in life. As best he could, he soothed the girl. "Only it could happen to me, because I am a village fool who has never been anywhere and has never seen anything." She continued screaming loudly and sobbing at the same time. "No need to beat yourself up like that," he told her quietly. They were already approaching the house. She stood in front of him, and in a second she calmed down, wiped her tears. What didn't he understand? Mom can't know anything. Even if she ever caught wind of this news, it was a long time ago, and not true. Adriana blinked once more, smiled, and she and Michael walked into the house. "Hi, here I am." She stood in the middle of the kitchen, but no one came out to see her. Couldn't they be somewhere else? Michael asked quietly. "I don't know. It's too late to work." Adriana walked quietly through the rooms, but there was no one there. They went outside. Pigs, chickens, goats, cows, all in place. No, just the owners. Then Adriana suggested that they might have gone to her house to do something there. That's where they went. Michael saw from afar that the light was on in the windows and that they were not sitting at home. The girl didn't understand. Now we'll ask them. They entered the house. "Hello." Adriana couldn't understand anything. Mother and father were sitting in their shirts and drinking tea after the bath. "Daughter, where are you from?" They stood up to meet her. "I have a question for you too. What are you doing here? Isn't your house enough? Or do you like my little bathhouse better than your huge one?" The girl smiled. "My father and I thought about it and decided that you would go to that house. But as I see, now you are not alone, and we will stay here." The woman concluded, "Well, that's good for you. And the cattle." She looked at her mother and father. "If you want it, slaughter it and sell it. You don't want to take care of it and raise it. There'll always be meat later." Her mother gave her the freedom of choice. "I see." She sat down on the bench, saw the milk in the jar, took a sip. "I want to tell you that our country, our people and our men are the best in the world. There's nowhere else like it." She tilted the jar again and drank it all down. "It's as if you hadn't drunk milk all your life." Mom was surprised at the change in her daughter's behavior. I hadn't. She was sober, but happy drunk. Here she was with her mom, dad, and even Michael, whom she herself had kicked out of the door. The girl cried. "Adriana, what's wrong?" The woman asked her. "Nothing." She shook her head. After everything, Michael picked her up, and together they walked home to where her mother and father had lived not long ago. "Can I stay with you?" he asked quietly. Of course, she hugged him. They lay in the night and were silent. "Adriana, will you marry me again?" he asked her. "And will you forgive me for all the things I have done?" She wondered too. "What did you do?" He turned to her, didn't pretend he didn't understand. She turned and hugged her former future husband too. "I never pretended at all. It was bad. I started drinking. And when everything is good, there's no need to drink," he said. "So you were bad with me if you started doing it at that time." She was surprised. "Not at work. But I couldn't leave until we got to the point where we were contracted. Just like you in that basement, I was on my watch." He kissed her on the nose. "Michael, you're so good. Forgive me, you fool." She turned away from him, and he put his arm around her. Just put his arm around Adriana. And they fell asleep. And in the morning, they told their parents they were getting married. They were happy for them. "You see, I told you not to be so hard on yourself." The mother hugged her daughter. "Now I will always obey you." Adriana cried. The picture of her sitting in the basement came back to her eyes. There was no one to blame but herself. She had done it all with her own hands, even though it was her fault. But if it hadn't been for Adriana and her love, he might have forgotten about her. As last time, the young people went to the city to get married in the registry office there, and afterward came to the village. Now there were no more off-site registrations. Michael and Adriana decided to get married in a church. Everything was ready for it. The village was fully assembled. Guys, I wish you only happiness, as in my childhood to my daughter. And now, said Betty to the newlyweds, I had to lose you and get a divorce to find my happiness. Took her in his arms again and began to twirl Michael around. Everything's going to be okay. Adriana believed that. She talked to Sofia about how things were going while she was away. It turned out to be pretty good. Michael still had all of his savings left that he hadn't had time to spend anywhere. Husband and wife started building a small store, a cafe right there on the highway. Drivers who passed by often all knew that this place had the most delicious pies and also meat and eggs. Adriana was happy with her man and what she'd missed about him before. I love you. She went up to him every time and kissed him. What's gotten into you? He laughed. He just wanted to say it, and she laughed. I'm so happy when you smile. He was being honest with her.